Welcome back to another episode of Adeptus Paternus. I have with me in the flesh my friendly local Loremaster Telfer.
Hello!
How's it going, Telfer?
It is going fantastic. Finally, the fruits of my labors are on display.
And what are these fruits that we're offering our very special guests?
So when you were pitching Adeptus Paternus, just as spitball and stuff, I had the idea of presenting us all the dads in Warhammer, of Warhammer 40k, and just ranking them and seeing who they all are, and just kind of as a lore project. And so when you started this, I kind of started in my free time and kind of in the background a research project that I'm not going to say rapidly got out of hand, but I quickly found some issues in that most of the factions are not made through traditional procreation, and so there aren't a lot of actual dads, any actual parents in Warhammer. So some of these are more metaphorical and are more father figures than actual dads, but I did try to actually find real dads where I could. So I've made a little PowerPoint, and Nick will then grade these on the Adeptus Paternus tier list. This project, it's taken quite a long time because I've had to go to some deep, dark corners of Warhammer lore, which is, like, I'm already in most of them in my free time, so it's not out of my way, but, like, the kind of spoiler warning for, like, the following stories. This is pretty much a list of all of the different books I ended up going to. I didn't include White Dwarf articles and things like that, but this is all the collection of material that I didn't read every single one of these. I read most of them and parts of many of them. Oh, I did leave a White Dwarf in there. Oh, let's move on.
If you don't want to get spoiled, I guess don't watch this because there's no way you're getting through all of this first. But we're just putting this up here. All right. Well, why don't we kick it off then?
Yeah. So this is kind of one of the core concepts I found very early on, is just a joke meme I made for the Discord. This is kind of representational of my research progress in the lore of finding actual fathers. Oh boy, there's some lessons to be learned. But I decided the first faction we should start with is Custodes.
Okay.
You want to guess the dad I picked from Adeptus Custodes?
You know, I mean, the obvious one obviously would be the Emperor.
It's the Emperor.
It's the Emperor, okay.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it.
Yeah. There we go. The Emperor of Mankind. So he is kind of our baseline dad. You know, you love him, you hate him.
You worship him.
Well, many do. Actually, kind of everyone does to a certain degree.
To a certain extent, one way or another.
So he's kind of, in some regards, the father of the Imperium. He created all the Primarchs, and then he kind of uses them as tools and doesn't really treat them very nicely.
Yeah.
And then just kind of discards them when they stop being pretty convenient for him.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of in the later lore, the later Horus Heresy books like the Siege of Terror really kind of we start getting a look into the Emperor's head a little bit more. And it's not a good place.
No, this is one, I mean, okay. I know that a lot of this was supposed to be that maybe characters I'm not familiar with, but there's literally no way to know anything about the setting and not be familiar with the Emperor of Mankind, so I don't know that I can approach this with a blank slate from my own readings.
Don't worry. You can include all of your knowledge in with these.
Yeah.
For any characters you do know about.
Yeah. This one, it's a tough one because what you learn, from the Horus Heresy books where it goes into his thinking, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. I mean, it's certainly not the kind of dad that I would want to be.
I would hope not.
But we're talking from a Custodes perspective, not necessarily from a Primarch perspective.
Yeah, okay. But if we're talking about it from the Custodes perspective,
it's a little bit not as bad.
The Custodes think he's great.
Yeah, Custodes think he's great. Well, they're programmed to think he's great. They have no other option. From the Custodes perspective, he is at the top, and I guess that's kind of how I have to go about it. Custodes have a great dad as far as they're concerned. I mean, he does use them, but they're happy to be used that way.
Okay. As someone who plays every Chaos faction, I have a different opinion than the
Sure.
Emperor.
Yeah,
this
but
is why I put you in charge.
Yeah. I mean, I do think we have to go, because otherwise, I mean, there's no way he would be in every single tier if you were going to go from everybody's perspective.
Oh, I didn't think about it that way.
No.
Okay.
So I think I just have to go from the faction's perspective, and I think they think that he is tops. So
okay, perfect.
That's how it's going to go.
We're starting off strong.
All right, let's see. Who's next?
Space Marines.
Generic Space Marines.
So it's all playable factions. So all of the Space Marines who don't have an independent codex are lumped into this. It's Ultramarines, Salamanders, White Scars, Iron Hands, everyone. All the sub-factions too. You want to take a quick guess as to the character I found?
Oh, I don't know. Calgar?
Thought about it. I thought about using Gilliman.
Uh-huh.
Because there's a lot of good dad qualities in Gilliman.
Yeah.
Right now. No, it is instead Shiban Khan.
Oh, okay.
This guy is awesome.
All right.
A Horus Heresy character. He's one of the White Scars. He's also been in a bunch of different books.
Okay.
And specifically the chapter, like the section that I'm referencing happens in the Siege of Terra series, which is fantastic. Even if you haven't read the, 90 books in the Horus Heresy before that, I would go read them. They are great. So Shiban Khan is one of the White Scars who was dedicated to defending the Lionsgate spaceport, and he got roughed up in the flight back to Terra, and so is still recuperating and kind of gaining the use of some augmetic limbs. So they're like, well, Shiban, you're not like at your prime, so you go work with the civilians at the top of the spaceport to try and like see what you can do with them. We're gonna go fight the actual like traitors. And instead of getting upset about that, he set about organizing all of the civilians into retrofitting all of the ships that were still at the spaceport to try and save civilians and save everyone. Everything he could do for the war effort. When it finally got attacked and the huge wave of traitors in the Lionsgate spaceport fell, he hopped in the biggest ship, gunned it out of there. The thing fell right out of the sky and he crash landed. Was pretty grievously injured and picked himself up and started hallucinating the teachings of his, I believe it was Yasugai, like his mentor, and just started walking back to the palace because he doesn't have anything else better to do. Along the way, he meets an Imperial Guard Lieutenant Cole, who has a human infant in his arms, and was like, well, you're coming with me. We're walking back to the palace. They get jumped by traitors. They get jumped by demons. And then they're walking for tens of miles across warp-infested no man's land with Shiban Khan injured, you only wielding a metal pole to murder demons with. Cole gets injured, and so he just carries the both of them and walks all the way back through the main gates of the palace, brings them back to the light of the Emperor.
You know, I had been thinking about doing the tiers according to, as I mentioned before we started filming, good dads in, either history or fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ones I was considering as a high tier level was Aeneas. I was like, oh, that's a bit of Aeneas imagery right there, just slinging, I guess in this case it's not his own father, but he's got a guy on his shoulder and carrying a baby, getting them out of the fall of the...
carrying a guardsman who is carrying an infant.
Yeah. And what's great about this is he's not even like a salamander. It's like, there's not just this monopoly of, the salamanders are the good guys who care about civilians.
In the Horus Heresy, a lot of the White Scars are really cool.
I mean, this seems like a pretty easy decision. Obviously, he himself is not a father, because Space Marines cannot procreate.
Probably not.
I mean, it's not definitive yet, right?
There's a lot in this that is not defined in the lore.
Yeah.
But there's a lot suggested, a lot implied.
Yeah, I'll even put that above the Emperor just because...
he honestly does more dad stuff than the Emperor does.
Yeah.
The Emperor doesn't even throw a ball with his kids.
No, I mean, there's some real self-sacrifice here. All right, so that was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Continuing with the good dads, good strong dads. Now what do we got?
Space Wolves.
Space
All
Wolves.
Right. This one's a little bit more obvious.
Okay, is it Bjorn?
Of course it's Bjorn.
Yeah.
Now, Space Wolves do have about 1,000 characters, but most of them were written in like 3rd edition and have about as much lore as 3rd edition did, and that's about it. So Bjorn the Fell-Handed, I kind of consider him, he's the like Better Call Dad figure of the Space Wolves.
Yep.
He was one of, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, he was from Old Terra before the Crusades started out, and he got signed up. He was with the Wolves before Russ was found. He joined in Russ's inner circle and was his like in his private pack. I don't remember exactly what that's called, but it's Wolf something or other, I'm sure.
Can't know everything.
Can't know everything. I didn't write that in my notes. Then he fought alongside Russ constantly, and when Russ kind of lost his mind after the Horace and took off into the Eye of Terror, I think. Some went into the Webway, some went into the Eye of Terror. Russ took off, and he left Bjorn behind. He took everyone else from his like inner circle with him, and he left Russ. And he left Bjorn. And Bjorn kind of took issue with that, and didn't have a great time about it. And so he started taking more and more chances and getting wilder and wilder and crazier in his fights until he finally got so injured that he had to get shoved inside of a dreadnought.
Yeah, as it goes.
As it goes for Space Marines. And so now Bjorn has existed in this dreadnought since mildly past the Heresy, and he gets woken up constantly in order to pull the Space Wolves' butt out of the fire. There's, I also like to think that they wake him up to read him bedtime stories.
I can imagine it.
But he is the old man of the Space Wolves. He is the one who, when something needs to happen, they wake up Bjorn the Fell-Handed, and he will lay it down. If it's the smackdown of his enemies, that's one thing. Or if it's settling an argument among the wolves, that's another thing too, is he will also arbitrate between Space Wolves.
Wasn't he an acting chapter master at 1.2? Or am I misremembering?
If he ever was.
Yeah, I don't remember. But I feel like he could have been.
I think he may have been briefly, but that was kind of in the part of him being super angry at.
Got it.
That might have been in his daddy issues.
No, I feel like it was when he was a dreadnought.
Really?
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe not. This is the problem with like you just watch a couple of YouTube videos, like this one. Except this one actually, Telfer did a lot of research.
I did a lot of research, but not all the research.
Anyway,
write it down in the comments. If you know of the reference as to him being a chapter master, write it down. I'd love to read it.
Yeah, very curious. I think Bjorn, for being a dreadnought, he's like the least pissed off dreadnought, right?
He's certainly the most tired dreadnought.
Yeah, and I think he does. You got to get some credit for that. On the other hand, though, like being kind of just the dad who only shows up when needed most, not like all the time, doesn't feel quite as
that's true. He's not around all the time.
So he like misses baseball games, but he'll be there for the wedding. I'll put that actually kind of in the middle, like the it's fine tier.
He's a little absentee.
He's a little absentee. Maybe he tries and makes it up by like buying you a fancy car or something. I don't know.
He does his best.
But
he's not around forever.
But he's not around for everything. So, and then it's because of his own poor choices.
That's true. He is, he's a Space Wolf. He made the best choices he possibly could.
Right. All right, moving on to Blood Angels.
Okay, there's a couple of good choices here.
Maybe Lamardes?
It is Lamardes.
Okay, yeah. All right, cool. I mean, just because he's like he's a shepherd, right, of his crazy flock.
Right. All of the Blood Angels are insanely angry. And none of them are well adjusted. They're all yelling all the time. I feel like they write all their comms in all caps. So Lamardes, Blood Angel, he fell to the Black Rage, but he was the only one to keep it in check. Like Mephiston fell to the Black Rage and then kind of went through self-therapy while a building was on top of him. And yeah, that's literally how Mephiston is a thing.
Sure.
He had a building fall on him and he was under the rubble for days, and then he kind of came to grips with it instead of going insane. Well, he's probably insane, but in any case. Lamardes was able to keep the Black Rage kind of in check, and so he is still a frothing madman, but was able to communicate to the apothecary that came to basically put him down. That like, no, I'm not done. And he's like, what? And so they actually had to call a whole tribunal and a council, and they're like, well, let's just make this lunatic in charge of all the other lunatics. And so
makes sense to
he
me.
acts as the chaplain of the lost, and so he's in charge of the Death Company, and he sees his role as like, these are my brothers that have lost their minds, but it's my job to make sure that their final sacrifice is worth something. That I'm in charge of making sure that they fight for the Emperor until the very end, and that everything they're doing now and their suffering is worth it. It's a noble goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, this one really has to be taken from the grimdark perspective. In that perspective, like, that's great. Obviously, I don't know that I would necessarily want to have him as my own dad.
Yeah, I would. That's like kind of restraining order level.
I mean, for what is actually going on, I get it. He's doing his best. On the other hand, I mean, I don't even think I can put it as high as like Bjorn, but I don't think I can put it too low. Like, he actually is.
Well, kind of. He's kept in stasis in between fights because otherwise he is still a frothing madman.
I don't think I could put it in unexpected more though, because I don't think I can expect more from Blood Angels. So,
oof, shots fired. Before we move on, though,
yes.
I did find some funny lore notes about Blood Angels.
Let's hear them.
So, do you know why Death Company is painted black? Why their armor is painted black?
I don't know.
So, it turns out that the Black Rage started manifesting before the Heresy.
Aha.
And I believe it was Sanguinius who, one of his sons, went nuts and murdered a bunch of the enemy and then murdered a bunch of his friends. And he's going, oh boy, this looks really bad. Hey, you, paint his armor black, and then we're going to pretend he's from a different chapter. So in order to cover up the flaw in the Blood Angel's gene seed, they painted his armor black, rolled him up in a rug, and then shoved him in the back of the Stormbird, Storm Eagle, and try to hide the evidence of Blood Angels beginning to go nuts and fall to the Black Rage.
That's pretty sad. Okay.
And now, and that's just the thing that happened.
Makes sense to me.
But also, going through some of the lore, could you go ahead and read some of these names out for me?
Okay. Raldoran, Ranael, Raphael, Michaelis, Raphaelos, Raphaen, Rafan, Rafen, Raxiatel, Rodolfio.
These are all legitimate characters in the Blood Angels.
Oh, man.
Boy. So, fun fact about Space Marines pick their names. So they pick their names when they're going through scout training. Who picked Rodolfio?
That is very funny. Oh, man.
Fun fact because I had to go down that rabbit hole. So, Librarian Rodolfio was part of the congregation that the chief librarian of the Ultramarines put together in order to fight the Beast in the War of the Beast, the colossally powerful Ork. So they got together a whole group of psychers to try and fight the Orks, to fight the Wog energy, in which it overloaded the librarians, and I don't think it was Tigerius, because he's the current librarian. I should have written that part down, but basically the chief librarian of the Ultramarines went nuts with Wog energy and then began murdering all the other librarians, and poor Rodolfio got murdered by an Ultramarine librarian.
Poor Rodolfio.
He picks Rodolfio and then gets team killed. Oof, that's a rough one.
I mean, but I suppose that is kind of the best that can be expected for a Blood Angel. I mean, getting killed by a Space Marine who went crazy.
Boy, that's irony.
Yeah, it sure is.
Oof.
Well, if you're a Blood Angels player that does narrative campaigns, please have a character named Rodolfio.
Name your librarian Rodolfio for his sake.
Yeah, for everyone's sake. All right, next we have Black Templar.
Black Templars. Not spoiled for choice. I kind of had to dig deep on this one.
Okay.
And you will never get the name right for this character. But that's also because every Black Templar is named the same thing.
Something Germanic, I mean.
Yeah. We have Hellbrant.
Okay.
There is no official artwork of Helbrand Alderic. So many references to Helbrecht.
Sure.
But no. I was thinking about Helbrecht, I was thinking about Sigismund, but I decided to go with Helbrand Alderic. So he was the 8th captain after the War of the Beast, when basically all the Space Marines were trying to put themselves back together again because humanity had almost fallen, and the Last Wall Protocol had been activated, so all of the Imperial Fists had come back together as a legion, the only time that's ever happened, and they were murdered almost to a man by Orks. Helbrand, then the chapter split up afterwards, and they kind of redistributed a lot of people. He went off into the Crusades afterwards, and was real gung-ho. Like, Sigismund was... Because we kind of think of Black Templars as the world eaters of the Loyalist world. Sigismund was so stoic that Dorn looked at him and like, you're too stoic for me. That's troubling. So he was much more quietly angry than what the Black Templars are today. So Helbrand was the one who kind of gave the Black Templars their current flair. He, there may be something to read into him being the captain of the 8th Company. But he kind of developed the tactic of running, screaming at the enemy like a lunatic. And to the point where he was actually like, during this time there wasn't a lot of great communication, there was a bunch of warp storms, and so he was left to his own devices and really kind of ran off and did his own thing for a long time. And then when he got back, he was actually censored by the chapter master, Thane, for like, what have you done? A little restraint here, brother. And he broke up the 8th Company and spread them across all the other chapters, but then found out that like they didn't have problems integrating into other chapters. They kind of got it all out of their system. And so you're like, okay, so he didn't just turn them into frothing barbarians. He actually let them get a lot of aggression out. And, it turns out that running, screaming at your enemy with a power sword and storm shield actually kind of works. So, well, maybe the 8th Company can just be the run screaming at your enemy's company, and we just rotate all of them through it, and we kind of develop that. And so Helbrand is, in a lot of ways, the father of the fighting style of the Black Templars.
Okay. I mean, yeah, what are you going to do with Black Templars? But...
point him at the enemy.
Yeah, point him at the enemy.
This is a much more spiritual father figure sense.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, is he, like, do you happen to know if he is, I don't know, seen that way by current Black Templars, or it's just...
I don't know if they can read.
Yeah.
I think he is kind of... I don't know if he's like necessarily revered like Sigismund is.
Right, of course.
His tactics have defined the tactics of the Black Templars from like M33 onwards or something like that.
Yeah. I don't even think I can put him in the same league as like Lombardi's, who is actively, taking care of people who can't take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So I think I actually, for now, probably drop him a tier. Cool.
I think that's fair.
Cool dude, but like...
Maybe if we get a couple more Black Templar books, we'll get some more characters that their job isn't to stand in the background of other books stoically holding a sword chained to their armor. But that's kind of what their job is right now in the lore.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. But also, Loremaster's note for Black Templars, honorable mention to Tech Marine Antioch. So Tech Marine Antioch created the Orbs of Antioch, which are a spherical grenade with a tiny cross on the top.
So the Holy Hand Grenade.
Yeah, they included the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch. It was actually an equipable relic in 4th edition Black Templars.
Oh, man.
That specifically states that it has a 5-second fuse. And yeah, they went full on. There's a Monty Python reference in the 4th edition Black Templars Codex.
I hope that whatever new model they get for 10th edition has this as an option. Yeah, they gave the Kriegers the...
Oh, man.
Yeah, they gave the Kriegers the shovel. They should give somebody like an actual Holy Hand Grenade model.
There'd be like... Black Templar have what, 2 characters? 2 named characters?
Yeah.
they could make Iron Hands players really angry and give them a named Tech Marine before Iron Hands gets one. Yeah, that would be amazing.
That would be pretty funny. They should. Okay, GW. If anyone there's watching, please do this.
Oh, please.
All right. Next is Dark Angels. Get the Space Marines out of the way.
I just went through all of the Space Marines first. All right, who do you think Dark Angels?
You know, it's funny because while you have the sort of crazies of Blood Angels and the crazies of Black Templars, they both feel like sort of an honest crazy, whereas Dark Angels feel like a
deep, seething crazy.
Yeah, like a weird crazy that you just don't want to hang out with. So I don't know. I can't think.
You feel kind of like the Ted Bundy of the Space Marine world.
Yes. Yeah. Azrael, I guess.
No, this is one of the few that I broke down and I used a Primarch.
Okay.
I tried to put as few Primarchs into this list as possible because they're kind of such an obvious shoe-in. But the Lion has some really... his recent lore is genuinely decent.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done a lot of work to flesh him out as a character, and I respect that. So I included him. I did use the old doofy He-Man artwork. That I believe on the far right is the first artwork made of Lionel Johnson.
Yeah, that is definitely He-Man.
God, I love old artwork. I tried to use as much really old school 40K artwork because the pencil drawings are the best.
Me too. I mean, yeah, so many of my thumbnails, I just use the old stuff. It's great.
There are plenty of excellent summations of Lionel Johnson on the internet already. The whole story of his founding and all that stuff, I'm not really going to go over now. There's plenty of places to find better summations than me.
But as a dad,
when he took over the First Legion and kind of started acting as a parental figure to the First Legion, he spent a lot of time working to quell the huge sense of superiority that the First Legion has, because they were the ones who primarily worked with the Emperor the most. They got the fanciest toys and all of the first weaponry and a lot of that stuff from the Emperor. They were his First Legion, and so that's why they still have all these crazy relics and all this extra stuff that the other legions don't have. And they were really kind of haughty about it, and definitely had a very smug sense. And so when he took over leadership of that, he spent a lot of time trying to stamp that out and be much more chivalrous, as is kind of the Lion's knightly countenance. But it's also noted in his lore that he was very stoic and secretive, and he admitted himself that he didn't get the emotions of other people. Which, read into that what you will. And I think a very key moment in Dark Angel history is the whole character of Luther, who was his was his mentor's dad, his adopted dad on planet, I believe, on Caliban. And Luther was adopted into the Dark Angels, and in the Horse Heresy, when there was a nuke planted on the Lion's flagship, Luther was the one who found it first, and the Lion saw Luther hesitate momentarily to disarm it, because Luther was kind of the feelings of jealousy about all of a sudden being kind of left behind because there's this whole crusade to run and the Lion doesn't have time for Luther anymore, really. The Lion sees this and sends Luther back to... It really, instead of confronting him, sends him back to Caliban for recruitment purposes rather than confronting him about this, which is what leads to Luther's fall to chaos and the whole scenario with the Fallen and all that craziness, which is, the Dark Angel's deep, dark secret.
Yeah.
Which could have been avoided if the Lion had sit down and had a heart-to-heart with his adoptive father. So that's not great.
Yeah, but, we all make mistakes.
Right. Then the whole heresy thing happened and all of that. But then after the Lion has woken up, he's now kind of gone on a big personal crusade to track down all of the Fallen. And all of the Fallen who are not Chaos aligned. Because there are still a bunch of them that were on Caliban. And Luther said, hey, guess what? We're doing this magical rebellion thing. And they went, we're just going to follow orders. They didn't fall to Chaos, but they did still rebel. And so all the Dark Angels are still looking to murder them. Instead, the Lion has been going around finding them and say, hey, look, you can come back to the fold as long as didn't traffic with Chaos and become part of, are they called the Risen or the Redeemed? But he's making his own subfaction of these Fallen who are becoming loyal again. And so this crusade of absolution does speak a lot to his changed character, and is, I think, kind of one of the only instances of a Primarch actually changing their mind about something, and really doing something to actually further something in a positive direction that isn't murder your enemies. So that's really the reason I included him as the father figure for this list.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of good character development there, which is interesting. And it feels a little unfair to ding him for having like human flaws when
he's superhuman, for the record.
Sure.
Super body does not mean super.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly canon that just because they're superhuman in terms of so many things, they're still human in terms of most of their psychology, just the not knowing fear part, I suppose. So it does feel like
super smart doesn't necessarily mean you're super wise.
Very true. So I don't know if I want to ding him too hard for just the fact that also we have a fuller picture of him, and we see that with the White Scar. I mean, you're only given this snapshot of like his heroic moment, and he could have been a complete jerk during peace. Well, I guess not peace, but like before the rebellion.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of people who are like complete psychopaths, but they end up in the right place at the right time in the middle of a war and do something super heroic, and then they're venerated. And if they had never gone to war, they might have, I don't know, murdered their wife and kids. Like,
hey, I got someone like that on this list later on.
Oh, boys. Foreshadowing. So, I want to give him some credit for that. He made mistakes. He's got, I think the idea of trying to work with your kids who maybe are the ones who made some bad decisions, and that's pretty good too, right? Like, little why am I the prodigal son kind of aspect there. So yeah, I'll give him, I'll put him up. Yeah, I'll just put him here right now, though, to the second tier.
I think that's
good job, son. Yeah.
He definitely has his flaws still.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of instances I left out of him kind of causing problems among other Primarchs.
Yeah, I just don't think that any Primarch could really be at the top, because the problem that I have with it also is that, I mean, any parent wants their kids to, any good parent wants their kids to exceed them, and that's like literally impossible.
Yeah.
If you're a Primarch and dealing with Space Marines. So there's that, which I guess I could have thought about with the Emperor, but again,
it's heresy to put him in anything less than perfect.
Right. I mean, from the Custodes perspective. All right, Deathwatch. Okay, now this one I'm curious about what you got. I have no idea.
No one else does either. Deathwatch is not very well. They have annoyingly 10,000 named characters.
Yeah, because anybody could have been in Deathwatch.
Right. And 99% of them are all dead. Because every Deathwatch book opens with a kill team of 10 of them, and they go through everyone's name, and then immediately 9 of them are murdered.
I mean, that's literally how Space Marine 2 starts.
It's every other book. And then Chapter 2 is another squad of 5, and 4 of them immediately get murdered. And then the 2 survivors are the ones that meet up and have an adventure. So there's 15 characters, and only 2 of them are actually alive for more than 2 pages. So there's a lot of characters. But I have chosen...
Slaughter Courland.
Slaughter Courland.
I mean, that's just a pretty good name.
Yeah. I don't know his first name. Slaughter is a moniker that was given to him.
Sure.
And he's always just referred to as Courland. I, in this artwork, thought he had a dope handlebar mustache. He does not. It is just the shadow. He should have had a handlebar mustache.
And actually, in the Deathwatch Vets models, there is a head with a handlebar mustache.
That may have been because the guy modeling it looked at his artwork and also thought the same thing.
Yeah, because, I mean...
Or Special Forces Space Marines are allowed to grow mustaches while everyone else is not allowed to.
I mean, yeah, like, there's another one with a beard, so, like, it's totally doable.
So, Slaughter Courland is another character from the saga of the War of the Beast. He, was the second captain of the Imperial Fists. He fought an Ork battle moon, which is just an amazing sentence to be able to say.
Yeah.
The Imperial Fists chapter was killed to a man except him. He was the only surviving Imperial Fist that got away. So he was able to retreat. He was the one who enacted the Last Wall Protocol. He brought all the successor chapters back together to make the Imperial Fist Legion once again, even though that was banned by Rupert Gilliman. The war against the Beast, even with the Last Wall Protocol going, the war against the Beast was going pretty poorly. Like, Vulcan 1v1'd the Beast and lost.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah, I'll get into that later. So he, actually against the Council of Terra, against their wishes, organized the Deathwatch. Specialty Space Marines to fight Orks. Instead of learning all tactics to fight everyone, specifically only fight Orks so these guys could really get the job done and actually win this damn war. And it was effective.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
And they successfully destroyed the battle moon that was in orbit over Terra. Like, that's how bad it got. Terra was being besieged by a battle moon. And the Deathwatch were the ones who got it done, blew up the moon, and saved the day. I believe, if I'm remembering the lore correctly, Courland was killed by the Beast.
Mm-hmm.
And...
Can't hold that against him.
Right. Oh, so his plan was... That's right, I wrote it down in my notes here. He made a reverse WOG using a Weird Boy and Sisters of Silence.
I'm not super familiar with this era of lore, so this is fascinating.
And so he made a inverse WOG wave that canceled out the WOG energy to make the Beast not empowered, so that he could then be fought and defeated.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
How's that for some Deathwatch nonsense?
That is what I want to hear.
He was killed. Maximus Thane, which is another fantastic name, stepped up and took over the Last Wall Protocol, and eventually Maximus Thane took over as the leader of the Imperial Fists. And Maximus Thane was the one who censured my choice for Black Templars. Hellbred.
It all comes together.
But Slaughter Courland was the father of the Deathwatch. He's the one who signed the papers that made them an official thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me not to be really partial because I love the Deathwatch.
Mm-hmm.
But like, just because he's the one who created them, I don't know that necessarily... I mean, it's hard with Space Marines, right?
It is pretty hard with Space Marines.
It's pretty hard with Space Marines. Like, unless you're, just like an upstanding dude. Yeah, okay, sure. He saved his chapter and started the Deathwatch. I think he deserves some credit for that.
I think he also probably saved humanity.
And he also, he gotta get some credit for that.
He was largely responsible for winning the war against the Beast.
Okay, you get some extra credit for that. I mean, it's sort of like...
that whole proletariat crusade thing was an absolute disaster.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna treat it as like the father who died while away at war and the kids never knew him or something.
Yeah, they read him in the books. And,
they can still be proud of their father who they didn't know. So I'll put him still maybe top of the middle.
Yeah, that's fair. He's ranking about the other kind of special Space Marines.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of all you can expect for these.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what do we got next? Oh, Grey Knights. Well, we're
Grey
still
Knights.
still with the Space Marines.
Yeah, not quite there. So, Grey Knights. There are a few characters, and as a Thousand Sons player, I'm definitely not biased, but this is the guy that I picked.
Okay. Revuel Arvida.
Yes. So he was a Thousand Sons, but he was not on Prospero when the whole planet being blown up and sucked into the warp thing happened.
Sure.
So he kind of showed up later on, and I guess Prospero wasn't sucked into the warp. Prospero was left behind. All the Thousand Sons got sucked into the warp.
Right.
But so he showed up later on, like, whoa, what happened? And he's just kind of wandering around, completely lost, and everything's destroyed. He has an epic fight with a pair of World Eater Berserkers, and this is when he knows something has gone terribly wrong, when he first encounters Cornate Berserkers.
Right.
Because he hasn't really experienced traitors yet. He catches a ride with, I think it was some White Scars, back to Terra. And if I remember correctly, I'm trying to pull the information out of my brain, he ends up acting as their navigator briefly, or he quells a warp storm or something like that. He does a pretty crazy psychic event in order to make it happen to get back to Terra. And he starts to feel the flesh change coming on, and so he actually goes to Malkador. Like, hey, buddy, this is kind of a problem. Malkador says, you know what? I got you. I got a plan. So it turns out what had happened just before that was Magnus, in his process of doing nothing wrong, had ruined everything and had fragmented his soul. And the good part of Magnus, the part, like, the really well-to-do, wants to make everything right, shining beacon of humanity part of Magnus, was at Terra. And Malkador had him, like, kind of caught in a big test tube. And because Magnus was needed for the Golden Throne to function properly, Malkador had the idea of, hey, I have this little tiny Magnus here in Revuel Arvida. What if I fuse them together and, like, Dragon Ball Z fuse them and make a new mini Magnus? And it didn't really work. When
min-maxing goes wrong.
Yeah, when min-maxing goes wrong. So he kind of started to explode and then didn't. And this character, Janus, was left. Or Janus, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And his name changes later on.
Sure.
But he's a Thousand Sons infused with the best parts of Magnus. Which he kind of stays inside the Imperial Palace, and Malkador has plans for him, and he eventually goes off. He's one of the first people to get sent off to Titan in secret by Magnus to create the Grey Knights. And he becomes the chapter master of the Grey Knights. And in a lot of ways, he was told by Malkador to what the Grey Knights should be, and he was the one in charge of actually doing all of that. Mm-hmm. He's the one who taught them how to fight demons. He's the one who gave them their mission, the status quo, and made the Grey Knights who they are. And there's a portion of... what book is it? Oh, I can't remember what book it is, but I think it was a Sister of Battle went to when the Sisters of Battle were becoming formed, becoming a thing. She goes and meets with Arvida, who is now Chapter Master or Secret Grandmaster, whatever their Chapter Masters are called. Janus, and says she is overwhelmed by his being and his like presence of doing good. And says that she senses in him all of the best aspects of humanity and all of the best intentions for humanity. And that's pretty much all the lore we have to go on. He's not really a huge player in books or anything like that, but he is, he has a cool backstory.
Yeah, it is a cool backstory. It almost feels like cheating, though, of like, just Deus Ex Machina, like, well, he's just the best of humanity, so what are you going to do? He's the best.
Oh, wait, here's the final quote. Here we go. So he's described as the embodiment of everything the Crimson King should have been, the final gift of the Emperor for the people he loved.
I mean, yeah, like I said, it really almost does feel like a Deus Ex Machina, like, it for this tier list, not necessarily in the lore.
Well, I mean, Grey Knights are kind of Deus Ex Machina.
They kind of are. They kind of are. Yeah, I mean, okay, really good Space Marine, who founds an important chapter.
In charge of fighting the unknowable evils of...
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I have to place him, I mean, I can't really do much more than I did for the others, but I don't know. I kind of like the Deathwatch guy a bit more, though.
That's fair.
Because also, like, I mean, look, if you're just a regular, okay, again, even Space Marines are, in terms of their psychology, just regular people. If you're a regular person and you're doing your best, then that's sort of more impressive. I mean, than if you just are essentially like a saint who does saintly things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I'll put him bottom of middle. It's fine. He's cool. This is not a knock on him. Just it's also like, actually, I might even have to bump down because like one of the things about being a dad is like, okay, that some people look up to you and there's an aspiration to be like that. And I mean, it's like, well, how can you be like somebody who's got like a purified saintly soul implanted in them? I don't know.
Hey, that's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, is it more impressive to overcome your nature and be good than to just be born perfect?
I mean, I think so. On the other hand, though, any loyalist of a traitor chapter gets some credit for that, right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
All right, I'll put him sort of bottom of middle for now. And I might revisit these things if I can remember them later. There's a lot to remember here.
Oh yeah, it is. You saw the list of sources.
Yes, we all saw the list of sources. Okay, so moving on to Imperial Agents.
Imperial Agents.
Now this is very broad.
Yep.
So I have no idea.
So I went with kind of the most obvious one and the one that does need to be mentioned.
Okay.
Malcador.
Sure. All right. Yeah.
He is the father of the Imperial Agents and arguably the co-father of the Imperium.
Yep.
It's really interesting, actually, the amount of lore we've gotten at the end of the Horus Heresy, and specifically, there's a couple of books that are about Malcador that we find out a lot of information, like one line in particular of Malcador saying, "The Emperor was not who he was today until he met me and I made him into what he is now." Which is, there's a lot to know about that in his secret laboratories, and Malcador is he is, I think, one of the most shades of gray character in 40k. He's certainly the brains of the Imperium. He's the one who set up all of the bureaucracy and set the groundwork for the Imperium to run. And his bureaucracy has stayed in place, for better or for worse, for 10,000 years. But he's a very complicated figure. He's very much kind of an ends justify the means.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one who made all of the assassin orders. And he's perfectly happy to lie to your face so he can, because it's easier to then stab you in the back and remove you later on. But he's also very much in the camp that humanity in the end needs to be run by humans and not by space marines.
Mm-hmm.
And he was one of the people who was very clear about, at the end of this crusade thing, the space marines cannot be the ones in charge. It has to be humans in control of human destiny. So, yeah, very much an ends justify the means of, we're going to do all this horrible stuff so that people can have a better life later.
Yeah, and I mean, there is, of course, his self-sacrifice of, sitting on the throne.
He does.
Which really is skin in the game, right? I mean,
absolutely, he is a perpetual, and he does melt himself to the point where being perpetual doesn't matter anymore with the Golden Throne. So yeah, he does walk the walk, and he's also just a badass in that he's able to psychically dominate Abaddon at one point.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we started this whole thing off of how do you deal with the Emperor, and I just kind of took the easy path of, I'm just going to go from the perspective of the Custodes. But like you said, I mean, the other founder of the Empire, I mean, I think this is where you can kind of deal with those aspects of the Emperor, because a lot of them are in common with Malcador.
Right, in a lot of the ways, those aspects of the Emperor are Malcador.
Basically, yeah.
Malcador has influenced the Emperor into becoming the being he becomes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that Malcador knows everything that he's doing, and he knows the full ramifications of everything that he's doing, and that weighs heavy on his conscience constantly through the heresy. He knows everything that's happening, and he believes it to be the best course of action.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough one. So I guess
it's one of those. That's why I say he's the most shades of gray character in 40K.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I think if you're taking it, from the grimdark perspective, that's one thing. If you're interpreting it from, our perspective, I mean, I have my opinion about people who, think that they can run everything for everybody else, but
yeah.
Don't need to go into that.
Nope, that's a different podcast.
But, okay, from the grimdark perspective, where, murderous aliens and demons exist that actually do want to, kill everybody, and, maybe it isn't a bad idea to have, people who know how to fight them in charge, as opposed to people who don't know how to fight them.
Yeah, more than anyone, Malcador knows the stakes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you got to give him a decent amount of credit. And the one thing that really pushes it over for me, there's the shades of gray, but that actually, gives him credit is that he knows what he's doing when he, sits on the Golden Throne and then actually sacrifices himself. I mean, that's real. So, I think I have to put him maybe, if not at the top, because there's just a little too much gray, top of the second tier.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good place.
And, again, honestly, between the two, I feel like if it were just me and not from the perspective of the Custodes, I think that Malcador actually is a bit more admirable than the Emperor.
In the End of the Death series, the 3 books that are that one book that is actually 3 books, there is quite a few sequences of Malcador sitting on the throne and is getting his soul dissolved, but is also still constantly doing everything he can be to help the defense and do what he can to put in place ways to keep the human race alive in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, as you said, that actually the things that he does the brutal things that he does weigh on his conscience, I think is more than you can say for the Emperor. I mean, he seems pretty.
Yeah. The Emperor's conscience is not something that ever gets in his way.
No. So I mean, even if there's maybe a sense of pity, it's not even clear necessarily if that is genuine or just manipulative.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, better people than us have done long things talking about the Emperor, so we won't go
watch Luton's series.
Yeah, we won't
amazing.
Go too deep into that. But yeah, all right, Sisters of Battle.
Okay, Sisters of Battle was tough to find a dad in an all-female faction.
Yep.
So I had to go back to the beginning.
Fair enough.
And pick Sebastian Thor. He's the guy who is all the way back in the Age of Apostasy. He was the one who led the revolt against Goj Van Dyer, who was the guy who pretty much kind of took over the Imperium, assassinated all the other High Lords, and took all the power for himself, and was going insane and assassinating everyone who looked at him funny. Not a great look for the Imperium, really.
No.
So Sebastian Thor just started preaching on planet off on the other side of the galaxy. It started getting a big following. Goj Van Dyer heard about this guy and went, well, we got to put a stop to that. So I'm going to go send some assassins. And then Sebastian Thor converted the assassins onto his side. He talked like 3 Calidus assassins down.
That's pretty amazing.
That's pretty baller.
Yeah.
So Sebastian Thor got the whole thing moving, and eventually the Adeptus Sororitas, which were the personal guard of Goj Van Dyer before they were really the Sisters of Battle, he was the one who really kind of facilitated the leader of them actually having a conversation with the Emperor, and then she walked out and beheaded Goj Van Dyer, and then there was a lot of rebuilding to do. So the High Council of Terra went like, hey, Seb, you're pretty good at this. Why don't you take the job? And he's like, nope, I'm just a humble preacher. And then he started getting more and more popular, and so the Ecclesiarchy, I believe they actually put him on on trial for heresy, because he declined the title of Ecclesiarch. And then the custodians stepped in and were like, no. This guy is as holy as they come. Hey, Sebastian, kind of pulled him aside and said, like, hey, buddy, like, if you don't take the job, we're probably going to kill you. And he's like, okay, change my mind, I'm taking the job. With the stipulation that I just get to go out and preach. And so, then he went off on a giant preaching expedition and just went around the galaxy and did his thing, and was also the head of the Ecclesiarchy. But he was also in charge of writing up the documents that prevented the Ecclesiarchy from having any men-at-arms. And then they kind of loopholed it and said, well, we can't have any men-at-arms, let's have these women-at-arms. And thus the Sisters of Battle were born. As far as, like, crazy religious nutjobs in the Imperium go, Sebastian Thor was actually kind of, as far as we know, a decent dude.
Yeah, got real George Washington vibes to him.
Wooden teeth and all, probably.
Yeah.
That's my touch to Sebastian Thor.
I mean, we were just talking about, how I am uncomfortable with people who think that they know best and should be in charge, and here's a dude who actively tried to turn it down as much and only kind of accepted the position just to smooth things over.
He was not under duress.
Yeah. And hey, it's not entirely his fault that there was the legalese loophole of women at arms, but
it's kind of worked out for him.
Yeah, it works out. I think pretty cool.
By the way, this artwork, I'm pretty sure this is Sebastian Thor.
Close enough.
I didn't find it on the actual GW website or in a book, but I'm 99% certain that's actually Sebastian Thor.
I think we can treat it that way. There we go. I think, I mean, it's sort of, I mean, I'm assuming he didn't actually have kids, but, you know, I mean, it, like...
Unknown, but unlikely.
Yeah, yeah. You know, so, but in terms of, you know, father figure to the flock, pretty good, pretty good. I mean, I think I'll put him up in the top tier. You know, I mean, yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Also, fun fact about Sebastian Thor, Treason the Infinite has his head. Just his head.
I mean, sure.
It's part of Treason the Infinite's ridiculous menagerie.
I mean, that is a good piece of history to have right there. I mean, hey, I'm glad it's getting preserved, I suppose.
Yep. He's not using it no more.
Nope. All right. Moving on to... Oops, sorry. Spoiled.
Spoilers. Adeptus Mechanicus.
Mechanicus. Uh-oh.
Now, this was way easier than I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
I looked at this faction and went, this is going to be a nightmare to find a dad.
Yeah, because they're all just made out of, like, human goop and stuff. Mass-produced.
Right. Or they're taken as infants and hypno-indoctrinated like Space Marines, except they're not into, like, heroic stuff. They're more into spreadsheets.
Yeah.
But I did find a fantastic example.
Okay.
In Vitaly Tychon. Now, he is in one book, Priest of Mars, and he's a whatever the AdMech version of astronomer is, astrogator or something like that.
Sure.
And there is no official GW art of him. So I have found fan art of him that, as far as I'm concerned, this is the most canon artwork we have of Vitaly Tychon and his daughter. His daughter is Linnea Tychon. So Vitaly Tychon was getting kind of old, and he went to his Adeptus Mechanicus seniors and said, hey, I'm thinking about having a kid. And they're like, no, not a good idea. You will get attached to the child and not attached to your work no more. And then that'll be at the end of your scholarship. And he went, yeah, but I'm still going to have a kid. So he cloned himself. Except the clone scheme didn't really go correctly, and he ended up with a daughter instead of a son. And he said, you know what? That's fantastic. I still love you. And he now has his daughter on the ship that he serves on and dotes on her. And he still loves being on a ship because he loves exploring and seeing the wonders of the galaxy, and he's done his best to instill that in his daughter. Like, she chooses to not have any external modification. All of her Mechanicus augmentation is internal. She keeps a human form, which bugs the bananas out of all of the other tech priests, who are all like, I need more tentacles. Mechadendrites, that's where it's at. That's the summer fashion. But she has decided to keep her form completely humanoid, and he secretly loves the fact that it annoys the bananas out of every other tech priest on the ship. And really, he's just in love with exploration and is in love with getting to share that with his daughter.
I mean, okay.
And that's one of the reasons why there is fan art of him, is because I think he's one of the true, just genuinely pure individuals in 40K.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's almost shocking after all this, like, grimdark, like, well, you know, we have to treat it from in the perspective of the universe, but I think this is an easy one to judge.
Pretty much. That's what I say. I was greatly surprised.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think Vitaly is going straight to the top.
Now, his child is a clone of himself.
I mean, but that doesn't really matter.
Right. As far as how our scorekeeping is going, yeah, he's possibly one of the most valid dads.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, accepting that, you know, your kid is, like, going to make different decisions than you would have, and still appreciating that, I mean, sounds great. Sounds very wholesome. Not something I associate with 40K, especially not AdMech.
Nope. I was happily surprised.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Alright, moving right along, Astra Militarum. Basically, all the other humans.
All the other humans. This one was pretty easy, but also I just didn't I may have been able to find a more hidden father in Astaminotaur, but I did kind of go for the low-hanging fruit.
All right, let's see it.
Ursakar E. Creed.
Yep.
The Guard's Guard.
Yep.
So he was orphaned on Cadia, which I think everyone on Cadia was orphaned. I think they're just born as orphans. I'm not sure how that works.
You gotta, before you leave, you gotta make a deposit.
Yeah, I guess, probably. So early on, he was drafted into the Cadian White Shields Youth Force. He had a meteoric rise among the forces of Cadia as a tactical genius. At one point in his career, he had a kid with a chamberlain to the governor of Theta Skylan, which is all the information I was able to find on that. And had Ursula Creed, who is down in the bottom right corner. She only saw her father twice at a distance, and her mother intentionally kept Ursakar in the dark. Ursakar never knew he was the father throughout his entire life, because she was convinced that it was his job to defend humanity from the Eye of Terror, and he can't be distracted with a family about that. So as absentee a father as there ever was one in the 40k universe, but he is a dad.
Yeah, okay. It's a sad story that happens, unfortunately, to people in real life, not knowing that they have a kid.
So I decided to throw you a curveball. And how do you grade a dad who doesn't know he's a dad?
No, I think this would be not applicable under most circumstances. I don't know. It's in the real world, I would say, well, hey, if you did the deed, then there might be another creed. You never know. I don't know, but
you don't know. Look, Ursula might die all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden he'll have had another kid.
Yeah, right. I guess. What's like Ursula's perspective on her father?
There hasn't really been a lot of lore about Ursula written yet.
Yeah, that would have helped.
From a meta perspective, Ursula was really written in as a character after all of Ursakar's. Oh yeah, you used the wrong.
I used the wrong.
Oh, we do the whole thing now. Ursula was written in after Ursakar was an established character, and so she is very much kind of an errata to his character. So she, as far as I know she's cool with it and is kind of just stepped into his boots as best she can of, now picking up the pieces of Cadia and defending humanity.
Yeah,
Duty and honor and all that.
I guess I'll just go with the. I don't know. I'm not angry, just disappointed.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, because I'm not angry. How can you be mad at someone who literally didn't know? But sort of disappointing because it would have been kind of cool to have some human connection there. Yeah. It's a bit of a Shakespearean tragedy of people thinking that they know best and making decisions on behalf of other people, and maybe it's not actually the best decision.
Yeah, very much so.
So, it's not his fault.
Not his fault.
But still kind of sucks. All right. Next we have...
Also,
oh yeah,
what does the E stand for in Ursakar E Creed, huh?
Do we know? Yes.
We don't know. Nobody knows. I vote that it stands for Emperor. But no, he's only written into the lore as Ursakar E Creed, and that is never explained what his middle name is.
It reminds me of the Simpsons episode where Homer wonders what the J in his, for Homer J. Simpson is.
Yeah, it's
and then he finds out that it's J-A-Y.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, Ursakar E Creed is currently owned by Trazen the Infinite.
Yeah.
So that's, another one.
Yeah, another one.
Another one.
I mean, I'm pretty sure almost everybody on here is going to have something that Trazen...
Trazen has their toenail clippings or something like that. Yeah, he's like that. Imperial Knights.
Imperial Knights.
The last Imperial faction.
Okay, good. Get it over with.
Yeah, it's half the list.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
So Imperial Knights, I thought this would be pretty easy because knight households are
families,
familial things, right?
Yep.
No, it wasn't as easy as I wanted it to be because there are not a lot of direct... There's like a bunch of family lines that are mentioned, but never fleshed out.
Mm-hmm.
So you get 35 names and no actual characters behind those names. So I spent a lot of time trawling through just family trees.
So-and-so beget so-and-so, beget so-and-so, beget so-and-so.
Because it's in every knight book of like, cool, I have to list out my family history to the 200th degree for the Throne Mechanicum to accept me, and so they list it all out. And so every one of those names appears on a wiki. And there's nothing in the wiki page.
That's bad.
But the person I chose is High King Tolwyn Tan Draconis.
It's a pretty cool name.
It's a pretty cool name. He's comes from the book Kingsblade. Mm-hmm. There's no artwork of him, so that's just the cover of the book. And then that's also a cool knight that got painted up in House Draconis paint job.
I love it.
High King Tolwyn is... So he has two kids, son and a daughter. Both of them are also knight pilots in House Draconis. He's a very strict, very regal man. He's excellent with politics. And there's multiple occasions throughout the book where he takes criticism very well in that he is extremely good at chastising a subordinate for saying something in a way that doesn't make them look like an idiot, doesn't emasculate them, and allows them to continue saving face while also putting out a potential fire among because war councils are not always friendly affairs. He does stuff like make sure that the casualty tallies for the crusade that he's in, like his section of the crusade, also includes all the guard numbers and not just knights. In that initially, cool, we only lost one knight. It's a good day. He's like, well, what's the guard casualties? And the guy's like, I don't know. Why do we care about that? He's like, I care. It's people. And get me those damn numbers. And then get him the numbers for that. And so he does care more about... He's not just sitting on his ivory throne.
You know that I'm pretty sure that scene is actually straight ripped off from something from the second book of the Once and Future King series.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, because I remember a scene like...
It borrows a lot.
It borrows a lot. I do remember that exact thing where Arthur's like, it's okay, we only lost one knight. And Merlin's like, yeah, but how many peasants died?
How many dudes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he spends a lot of the book dressing down haughty nobles and kind of telling off the upper crust of like, we're in a war here. This is no time to be playing politics. We have to defend our planet from these word bearers that showed up all of a sudden.
Oops.
But unfortunately, he is, of course, murdered before the book is out. Word bearers infect a bunch of House Draconis knights with scrap code, and they turn on him, and he sacrifices himself to save his son and daughter so that they can go on to lead the defense and save the planet. But he does, to their face, tell them, I'm proud of you.
Pretty
Which
good.
is, as far as I know, the only reference I can find of a dad saying those words in the verse of Warhammer 40k.
Oh, man. Well, that's got to count for something.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that there's like another actually good dad. Make sure I'm using not the K.
Yeah,
not the spiky one. Where do I go? I mean, the AdMech dad is leading his best life, and feels kind of happy-go-lucky, but sacrificing yourself to save your kids I think probably has to take the top spot. So, yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
That's why I chose High King Tolwyn. I think he's an excellent example, a shining beacon of chivalry.
Yeah, a knight in shining armor. I mean, that's pretty cool. I like that they do have some,
it's
really
not just haughty nobles.
Yeah, not just haughty nobles, and also just in 40k that there are some real good dads. Okay.
So Chaos Space Marines. So for this, Emperor's Children is a different faction. So
yes.
I had to find one, and in an effort to not get this video demonetized, I did not go with Hansu and his the Demonculaba.
Yes, thank you.
No, we're not going there.
That's
a whole different thing.
Yeah, well, that was also a very easy decision to make.
Yes. You would definitely very rapidly go in one category.
Yeah.
But I have chosen Talos Valcorin.
Okay.
Boy, fan favorite for a lot of people. He is the main character of the 3-part Night Lord trilogy. He is the Night Hunter, a member of First Claw, 10th Company. And he's the first one to hunt down the assassin that killed Kurz. He kind of took offense to his Primarch being assassinated and decided to go kill the assassin, even though Kurz is like, I deserve this, don't chase after my assassin. A lot of other Night Lords jumped on the case after that when they realized the assassin had run off with most of the chapter relics as well. But they were kind of going after the relics and not after revenge. Talos Valcorin is a true believer who went after the assassin on a matter of principle. He's cursed with prophetic visions. He kind of sees it as a curse, sometimes as a blessing, but has seizures where he sees the future. Not exactly a great deal for him. He's not super happy about it.
I wonder why.
Yeah. He also keeps a bunch of slaves, and throughout the book series, his slave Septimus, which is like his primary take care of him, polish his armor, maintain his bolter, and a navigator, Octavia, who he enslaves. The two of them end up having a kid, and I mean, this is spoiler warning for the very end of the whole trilogy. We're not sure, but basically everyone dies throughout the entire series, and at the very end of it, Septimus and Octavia take off in a little. They escape with a World Eater apothecary chasing after them. Later on, flash forward to somewhat in the future, the apothecary presents a new Night Lord to a council of Chaos Space Marines, whose name is Decimus. Talos names all of his slaves numerically, sequentially. And Decimus has all the relics of all of 10th Claw, who all end up dying throughout the series. And it's strongly hinted at that Decimus is Septimus and Octavius' kid, who has been transformed into a Space Marine, into a Night Lord, who was kind of... Talos saw through prophecy how to make this character, make Decimus become real. What steps to walk down, because most of the book is against Eldar, and Eldar Farseers seeing the same future that Talos is, and both of them taking steps to ensure that different futures come to pass. And it's wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey nonsense. But so in the end of the book, Decimus is created, and Talos is in a lot of ways responsible for that, because through his visions, he saw all the steps that needed to happen to create Decimus.
You know, I think that if we're going to be treating the Emperor from the perspective of Custodes, I think we have to treat Talos from the perspective of...
Well, if you treat him from the perspective of Night Lords, he does a lot of Night Lord stuff.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And so I think, that, but again, from the perspective of chaos, a lot of that is excusable. And I mean, heck, even from the perspective of just Space Marines, I mean, they have they are called serfs, right?
Chapter serfs.
The chapter serfs, which are basically slaves.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, I mean, there's no real distinction there. And I mean, someone who actually cares enough about, bringing the child of their, God, how are we trying to get this not demonetized and make people angry, but that an individual born into that station rising to his same rank, I mean, there's a certain level of, from the perspective of chaos.
It's not great.
It's not great,
But,
slavery's bad.
Slavery's bad.
Like, I'm going to go on the record with that hot take.
Bold of you.
Yeah. But I guess you just have to go from the chaos perspective. And I mean, it's pretty cool, I guess. This is the one, right?
Yeah, that's chaos. I'm sure.
Generic. I mean, because also we have to be real that it's not like Space Marines are really great guys either.
No, they are. They're true believers, but yeah, they're not necessarily the good guys.
No, certainly not. So I think he actually kind of does more stuff that is fatherly.
Oh yeah, I mean he's an abusive father as far as to the nines, but he does kind of in a lot of ways bring a child, someone molded in his image into existence.
I think I'll go top of it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know it's a tough one because hey, don't do that. Don't have slaves and then raise their kid to be like you.
Right, with there's gonna be a lot of chaos stuff that's it's not good.
Yeah. All right, well, let's have some more of that.
Death Guard. Oh boy.
I mean, is it not just Grandfather Nurgle?
Well, I tried really, really hard to justify Nathaniel Garrow as the dad for Death Guard. And I couldn't.
Yeah.
Nathaniel Garrow does nothing fatherly. He's just a Space Marine. He's a really cool Space Marine, but he doesn't do anything dadly.
Yeah.
He's a soldier.
Yeah.
So I had to go with Mortarion. Mortarion. I think after doing a bunch of research on him, I think Mortarion gets cucked more often than anyone else in 40k.
That's saying something.
Magnus gets his teeth kicked in at the last possible second with every plan he does. Perturabo just gets dumped on by everyone, but he knows it's going to happen and he's expecting it anyway. Mortarion, man, his life just sucks. So he got tossed onto Barbarous as an infant, which is a demon world, basically.
I mean, it's in the name.
Yeah, full of plague and corruption, ruled by brutal dictators who were partial demons, literal partial warp demons. And so he grows up as a revolutionary against them because he is stronger, and so he can survive because he's a Primarch, he can survive in the poison's atmosphere better than everyone else. And so he is strong enough to lead the revolution against the most brutal dictator on the planet, which was his original adoptive father until he kicked him out, until he ran away. And so he finally leads this revolution against his adoptive father, and he starts getting his ass whooped, and then the Emperor shows up and is like, "Hey, buddy, I'm gonna help you kill your dad," and leads him up, gets him up to the palace, and Mortarion can't really get the job done. He can't kill him. He's too weak to do so. So Big E steps in and kills his dad. It kills his adopted dad in front of him and kind of steals him. Mortarion doesn't get like the satisfaction of killing the brutal warlord who was in charge of making his childhood miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just kind of doesn't really... He's not a happy guy. He doesn't exactly make the Death Guard happy. They're kind of given bad jobs, so to speak, in the Crusade. He hates Psykers, but Primarchs are all, to a lesser degree, Psykers, and especially later becomes a Psyker. And he's the most vocal opponent at the Council of Nicaea when Psykers got banned. After he starts turning traitor, he gets into a fight with Jagatai. Jagatai completely outpaces him. Jagatai is able to run circles around him. There's the whole Ignatius Golgor thing, which is the first time he actually summons demons. He murders his 7 Death Guard or Death Shroud bodyguard to turn one of his other Death Shroud, Ignatius Golgor, into a giant demon thing. But he's also not chill about, I just murdered all of my closest confidants in order to summon a monster. And then chains up Ignatius Golgor in the basement, basically, of his spaceship. Not happy about that. There are multiple cutscenes of him flashing back to that, of him, literally on his hands and knees, sobbing, begging just the memory of the Emperor for forgiveness for doing this to his children. Then Typhus does the whole strand them in the warp and let Nurgle in. Cut to Mortarion standing in the vacuum, in the warp, on top of his spaceship, tears and screaming, crying, begging Nurgle to save his sons and end their suffering. Let's see on my list here. I have a whole list here. And then after he promises himself to Nurgle, Nurgle still likes Typhus more. Then they go to the whole Siege of Terra thing. No one really likes him because he's smells horrible and tends to murder everyone around him with plagues. He tries to kill Jagatai again. Jagatai ends up murdering him instead. Then, in that process, he meets up with Nathaniel Garrow, who I mentioned earlier, who's an awesome character. He has his own whole series of books. He's like, look, I'm not going to kill you, Nathaniel, because you are a loyal son. You've one of the best Death Guard out there. You're the best soldier. You're the most loyal. Come on back to the fold, buddy. Then Garrow pretty much just gives him the finger and forces Mortarion to murder him in front of all of Mortarion's friends. And doesn't give in, and Mortarion's kind of upset about that for a while. And he, even though Garrow dies, he still kind of gets the last laugh on Mortarion.
Sure.
There's multiple other flashbacks of him, sobbing and crying to other things. His ship ends up turning into a form of Barbarous because that's what he kind of warp malleus it into, the place that he hates the most. And then he gets his ass whooped by Kaldor Drago, who carves Drago's name into his heart with his sword, which, oh man, Lord. And in the present day, he tried to pick a fight with, he picked a fight with Guilliman. Nurgle's like, hey buddy, don't do that. I got other plans for you. Let's go over this way, and I got some other plans. And then he's like, nope, I'm going to kill Guilliman, and I'm going to make you real proud, Papa Nurgle. Then Guilliman channels the light of the Emperor and banishes Mortarion back to the warp, and so he loses the favor of Nurgle, and then he goes to pick on Perturabo, because he's like, this is a fight I can win. So, yeah, he just kind of continually gets dumped on the entire time. And throughout the entirety of his lore, he's just in doing all this research, I think he's kind of akin to the real dad who's constantly overshadowed by a series of stepfathers. Because there's always a bigger, more person who's in the driving seat of the Death Guard, and it's not him. It's Nurgle, it's Typhus, it's the Emperor. There's this long, it's Nathaniel Garrow. There's this long series of people who are just like, he's playing second fiddle to.
Yeah.
Man, Mortarion, what a bummer your life is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's pretty bad, though, if you not only recognize how you're screwing things up for your kids, but you just sort of continue doing it.
Yeah,
and
there's a fair amount of throwing good money after bad at a certain point.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's also like, if you get them into the bad situation to begin with, and then you're just kind of, woe is me, I can't fix things, and this all is it makes me think of, like, I don't know, like a parent who may have an addiction and just is like, oh man, this sucks. I can't believe that I'm like ruining my kid's life by taking drugs, and then immediately starts taking drugs.
Yeah.
So, I gotta drop to the
bottom. Is that Nurgle or is that Death Guard?
That is Nurgle. Well, here's Death Guard.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, this is because this is the Grotmus one, so the demons all get their own. Well, whatever, we'll just put them all in the same place.
Yeah, demons famously get along well, so.
Yes. All right. Poor Mortarion. I wish I felt worse for you. Emperor's Children.
Emperor's Children. This is a pretty obvious one.
Yeah.
It's Fabius Bile.
Yeah.
It is the clone father. Oh, we're on the wrong screen.
We are on the wrong screen. Thank you for reminding me.
Fabius Bile, 40K's chief mad scientist, the clone father, the spider primogenitor. He's had a whole book series about it. They're cool. Go read them. He devoted himself to curing the blight that the Emperor's children were suffering and kind of put that on his back. Has kind of succeeded. He's created a lot of enhanced warriors, is the kind of term 40K uses for it.
Sure.
He makes a lot of Chaos Space Marines. He made a lot of Space Marines. He's made a lot of Chaos Space Marines. He's the one who's in charge of... he made the original Noise Marines, or Cacophony, which are now different, I think.
No.
Noise Marines and Cacophony are...
Yeah.
I think there's probably a little difference in there. Boy, spelling Cacophony starts with a K. He's made his own Chaos Primaris Marines, probably. He's gotten his hands on a lot of them, and he's not really impressed with them. And, I can do better than this. I'm not going to, but I could.
For reasons.
One of his more impressive creations, I think, are his Gland Hounds, which are the enhanced humanoids. They're kind of his attempt to remake humanity. And they're kind of like Space Marines light.
Mm-hmm.
In that they are designed to pack, hunt, and murder Space Marines. In that he's also kind of, because he's a pre-heresy character, he's also kind of on board with humanity should eventually be the one to take over the galaxy. It shouldn't be Space Marines in charge. But we're going about it wrong, and I'm still siding with the traitors. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure that Gland Hounds produce more Gland Hounds. I don't think they make baseline humans. I don't think they have to be implanted with minor gene seed and things like that. I'm pretty sure they are their own species now. I'm not 100% on that one. Overall, he's, as far as Chaos Space Marines go, he's, definitely not a good person, but
he can hold a more rational conversation.
Yes. Yeah, he's more sane, as weird as that sounds, than... He's definitely more principled than almost every other Chaos Space Marine out there. Yeah, and he's devoted to kind of his version of the evolution of humanity, and he does very much regard the Glandhound as his children. And is like, cool, it's still survival of the fittest, you still have to go murder for me, but I'm going to give you the best odds of survival out there.
I mean, hey, I think that in and of itself, if you're going with chaos, like that's
Kind of grading on a curve at this point.
yeah, you're yeah. I think I can. I mean, he actually did create, which I suppose is fatherly.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, it still again feels like it's for serving his purposes as opposed to.
It is.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I think I gotta
Bump him down a little bit.
Bump him down a little bit for that. You know what? I might even drop him down to. I expected more.
I think that's fair. I think he could be doing more to be a better person. He's not a better person.
Yeah.
And, he murders countless people for his experiments.
Yeah, and I mean, but I mean also just like, if he had made, better humans that weren't just for murdering people, but also for, their own benefit, like,
yeah,
that would have helped.
Yeah.
Like, if he could have, I don't know, figured out humans who don't get cancer, that would have been nice.
I mean, most of his quest was figuring out how to cure Space Marine cancer.
True.
He's kind of done it, but also kind of not figured it out.
Yeah. But also, like, regular human cancer would have been nice to have been dealt with.
There's that, too.
Yeah.
Fun fact, do you know how many Primarchs Fabius Bile has cloned?
All but one.
He has made a shit ton of Ferrus Manus clones.
Okay.
Fulgrim commissioned him to keep making Ferrus Manus clones until he finally made one that Fulgrim could convince to turn to Chaos. None of them did. He's cloned Fulgrim a couple of times. He made a clone of Horus, who ended up getting turned into a Keeper of Secrets, who now torments him. I could be wrong on this one, but I'm pretty sure that's now Melusine, who constantly torments him. And then personally, he claims to have clones of all of them on ice. Just chilling.
Including the ones we don't know about.
That's what he says. I don't know if we can take him for his word.
Yeah. No.
There's also rumors of a minor warp deity called Pater Mutatus.
Okay.
Of his human gland hounds worshipping him as a god has started creating a minor warp god of him.
That is very funny.
Which is hilarious because he views the warp, like demons, as eidolons and like not as real things, as figments of your imagination. So it would be hilarious if there's a daemon of Fabius Bile out there that Fabius Bile does not believe is real.
I can't think of anything more 40k. Alright, Thousand Sons.
Oh, Thousand Sons. My boys.
I mean, is this another Primarch one?
Yeah. It's Magnus.
Yeah.
I tried hard to figure out how to make it into Ahriman, but like, Ahriman's story just reads like a 40k Hangover movie, and not like a fatherly tale.
Sure.
So Magnus, he did, as the joke goes, Magnus did the best he could with the information that he had available to him at the time.
Yes.
He did ruin everything.
Yes.
And then he was in putting his soul back together again. The good part of him got turned into Giannis with the Grey Knights, so he could never put the good part of him back into himself, and he could never become a good person again. There's part of him missing forever. So as pre-heresy, he did turn Prospero into a paradise world for Psykers to exist in peace and in harmony, and to explore their abilities and become accepted as their true selves. There's a lot to be said about making a whole world for your strange mutant people that kind of a Professor X from the X-Men idea. He wasn't necessarily a great dad to the Thousand Sons. The Thousand Sons were never...
Putting it lightly.
Yeah. They were never really a super, like, numerically prosperous legion, and so he did work pretty hard to make sure that their lives weren't thrown away. But he did goof up the whole Webway project thing. And did end up condemning all of them to Zeech in order to save them. But there is, like, the book Wrath of Magnus in the Siege of Terra series. It's kind of a mini book on Magnus. Like he and Armin and a couple other sorcerers sneak into the Imperial Palace in an effort to go assassinate the Emperor. Or talk to him. It's not really super clear. It's kind of hidden. And so he blows his cover in order to save pretty much like a museum that is full of refugees is about to be hit with a phosphex bomb, which is pretty much like psychic napalm, or demonic napalm. But so he decides to blow his cover with his sorcerers in order to make a shield to protect all the civilians inside there, which he didn't need to do, but he decided to do it because he's not like cartoonishly evil at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So he still is working to try and protect civilians on the opposite side. He actually gets into a face-to-face with the Golden Throne and with Vulcan. And he is like, has his spear leveled at the Emperor, who is entombed upon the throne already, or is on the throne already, and has doubts and has moments, and this doubt gives Vulcan enough time to stop him and start talking to him. Vulcan gives him the chance, after they fight for a little while, Vulcan gives him the chance to, like, hey, come back to the Loyalist side. You can, like, come back, and you were always meant to sit on this throne. It's not too late for that. You can be used for your intended purpose. And he's like, well, what about my sons? Like, well, no. There's a flaw in your gene seed, and they were all going to be thrown into the blender anyway because they're all flawed and there's no saving it. And so he pretty much gives them the finger and says, even one of my sons is too high a price to pay. And then condemns them all to damnation with each. But refuses to give up his sons just so he can have a heart-to-heart with the Emperor again.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said for that.
Magnus is a tragic tale.
Magnus is definitely tragic with a capital T.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I mean, it's one of the more interesting parts of the lore. It is a tough one to rank. I mean, it does actually kind of show that he, I mean, probably cares about his Space Marines more than, you know, most of the other Primarchs that I can think of.
Yeah, I think he saw them more as individuals than a lot of the other Primarchs.
Yeah. And he was, you know, trying to do his best for them, improve.
But his best was also not enough.
His best was also not enough. Yeah, it's a sad one. Also, where, I mean, I know this is seeing.
Oh, keep going over the left.
Keep going to. Oh,
there you are.
There we go. Yeah. For some reason, I don't know.
You're looking for the red part on it.
I'm looking for the red part on it. Yeah. Poor guy. I actually feel worse for him than I do for Mortarion.
Yeah, I do. Magnus, it's not until he becomes... Magnus, yeah, he's still an ass. He's still like the, you know... nerd. And he's still pretty haughty about a lot of the stuff that he does.
Yes.
But ultimately, he is the nerd who keeps getting bullied.
Yeah.
As opposed to Mortarion, who is just the weird kid who keeps bullying people and getting bullied.
Yes. Well, there's in Yiddish, there's the Schlemiel and the Schlemazel. The Schlemiel is kind of more like Magnus, who just can't get anything right.
Yeah.
And then there's the Schlemazel, who just like... Or the Schlemiel, they can't get anything right and just sort of... they just mess up. They try, but they mess up. And then the Schlemazel is just like a complete wreck. Like, you know, just no matter what happens, like and it's entirely their fault too.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think, you know, actually I'm going to put him above Bile just because he really was, even if he made the wrong decisions.
As a long-time Thousand Sons fan, yeah, he kind of goes and...
Yeah.
He could have done more.
He could have done more. He could have done more. All right. Next we have. Also, I'm just really glad that you included.
Dude, I love it. I want one of those. I gotta find one still. They're collector's items, so they're obscenely expensive.
Yeah, but still.
I just gotta stick one on the right size base and then pretend that go to a team with that. And the old minis are fantastic.
I mean, yeah, that is really classic. All right, World Eaters.
World Eaters, and that I included on the left is the OG World Eater flag from like Space Marine before it became 40K. That is the first one that was ever published, which I found that in my trawling, and you know, it's cool.
It is. I mean, it is literally a mouth eating a world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess the next one is too, but
so World Eaters, lore, not good.
Yeah.
There's, like, pretty obviously, there's, like, cool. What do people know? There's Angron, and there's, oh, what else?
I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything.
Yeah, there's Karn.
Yeah, sure.
And, like, aside from that, it's like, oh, cool. It's a bunch of nameless berserkers of, like, your job is to be the MacGuffin and die.
Yep.
Yeah, so
Berserk.
I delved this one took me a while.
Okay.
And I'm making a supposition, but Moarn Goreheart.
Okay. Never heard of him.
There's a reason for that. He only appears in the Warhammer Relic Nemesis expansion. And I am making a supposition in that his lore says that he was an Imperial miner whose family was killed by World Eaters, and in a blind rage, he killed several berserkers with a vibro pickaxe.
Wow.
The captain saw him do this and went, you know what? I got plans for that one. And they didn't murder him. Instead, they tossed him in an arena with a bunch of crazies and had him murder his way to the point and psychically absorb demonic gene seed or something like that, and eventually turned him through demonic ritual, into a berserker. To which then he got implanted with the Butcher's Nails, and that turned him into such a psychotic killing frenzy that he murdered the entire World Eater, warband.
Yeah.
And then just set out across the stars to murder everyone because he's that angry. So I'm making a supposition that he was an adult. It says his family was murdered. It doesn't describe his family. But I'm going to assume he was not a literal child who murdered several World Eater berserkers.
Yeah, that he was a dad who...
That his family was his wife and kids. And not that he watched his parents get murdered, and then just a toddler picked up a pickaxe and started murdering coordinate berserkers.
I think that's a very reasonable assumption.
Thank you. It is still an assumption, but
I think we can roll with it. I think we have to.
Bows I gotta pull when researching World Eater lore.
Oh man, you know what? So I think you did a really good job with that one.
Thank you.
Because once you take it from that perspective, if they were just a kid or a teenager, then it's whatever. But the idea of okay, a father witnessing that and then going, off the deep end to get revenge. It's maybe it's maybe not the healthiest.
No,
but
he kills a lot more bad guys than good guys until he just runs off into the stars as a screaming lunatic.
And I mean, it's entirely possible that after having killed the berserkers who, killed his family, if they hadn't captured him, that he might have, been able to go through the stages of grief and come out of it, and had a normal life. But instead
I don't know if the Imperium has therapists.
They do. They do. Yes.
Oh,
they do. They have. They actually
has not come up in my research.
Yes, they do. There was. I have heard about this, that there are therapy planets. And they're also...
Oh, wait, yes. Actually, I read Dark Imperium recently, and there is a therapy planet.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the downside is if it doesn't work, you get turned into a servitor.
Well, that's kind of the downside of everything in 40k anyway, so...
But if it does work, then, like, yes, it's great. And apparently
back to the front lines, sir.
Yeah, apparently the therapy planets are actually quite, therapeutic.
Yeah, they're supposed to be paradise worlds.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, maybe he could have been rehabilitated.
But he wasn't. He was captured. So, whatever.
Yeah, he got 40k.
But he did get revenge.
He did get the people who killed his family.
So, I'm gonna have to actually put that kind of up there. Maybe not, like, top of second tier, but, definitely best for Chaos so far.
So far, he's the best. Dad.
Yeah. Okay, and I mean, again, grading on a curve, but still.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes. And shout out to World Eater Librarian Asketil. If you could read that for me.
Asketil was a World Eater's librarian during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. He took part in the Battle of Istvan III, but it is unclear if he fought for the Loyalists or traitors.
This is the majority of World Eater lore. Most of the wiki entries on World Eater characters are about this long and have this much information in them. He showed up as a screaming lunatic. We don't know what side he was on because he was murdering indiscriminately, and then he ran into the sunset screaming.
Poor World Eaters.
Boy, shout out to Asketil, being a true homie.
Okay, Chaos Demons.
Chaos Demons. All of them. Chaos is just one playable faction, so I only picked one. It's the obvious choice.
Yeah.
It's Papa Nurgle.
Yeah, I mean, I should have realized why he wasn't for DG.
Yeah.
Because he had to save him.
Demons.
Yep.
Boy. So Nurgle's the god of death, decay, rebirth, but also perseverance and survival, and the idea of the circle of life. In death, there's also life. Without getting into it, the warp wasn't always a terrible place, and millennia of constant galaxy-wide war has turned it into a hellscape. So one of Nurgle's ideals is, like, the greatest inspiration comes in the darkest moments. In times of crisis, mortals are truly tested and driven to excel. And that was kind of one of Nurgle's core tenets before he just became about rot and decay, about challenge. But there's also mirth and laughter of, he's also about joyously spreading the contagions, and he is much more of a patronly god than the other three, and is much more about kind of, more than the other Chaos Gods, he takes pride in the achievement of his followers, and he will... he protects them from death and pain, and he'll reward them for their actions rather than just you serve my purposes. Either you did what I told you to or not. He does kind of take a more personal stance on his followers, or with his followers, than the other Chaos Gods.
Yeah, I always wondered if it was really the case that, there was real generosity there, or if it's just, manipulation. I don't know.
Well, there's also the idea of mortals make gods, and so how much is the belief that his followers, that he is a fatherly figure, make him into a father?
Yeah. Does that work? It doesn't work for the demons, though, right? It has to be the mortals.
Right, demons have no belief. They are. No, so it's the mortals that are the ones that influence the demons. So,
I don't know. This is... I think if you just take it without reading too deeply into it and second-guessing, then, for a Chaos God, not the worst.
His followers laugh a lot more than every other follower.
Yeah, probably more than...
this is mirth laughter, not cry laughter.
Right.
There's a lot of cry laughter for some other factions, not with Nurgle.
So, yeah, I get it. And the fact that it's not just being protected from death, but also being protected from pain, so that, they don't you're not like suffering while you've been infected.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's also people fall to Nurgle when they are just menial drudges, and the basic suffering of life is too much for them, and they pray for deliverance from that, and that can invite Nurgle in as well. So office drones can also be followers of Nurgle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see it. Again, I mean, it's like it's a tricky one because
not a great role model.
No, not especially.
Not a lot of dads involve pus. Not a lot of good dads involve pus and maggots.
But I think for what it is, I guess I just got to put him mid-tier.
Yeah, again with the grading of the curve and coming from the chaos perspective.
I mean, since we have the other demons here, I'm just going to quickly rank them. I'm actually going to put Khorne up. They're all going to go at the end because they're all jerks.
They're not good.
But I think I will put Khorne tops because at least
there's some pride there.
There's some pride there. And then I really don't know which way. I think Tzeentch has to go last.
I think so too. Tzeentch is my homie, and I think he's dead last.
Yeah,
he is the most likely to empty his son's bank account to pay for a gambling addiction.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and at least with Slaanesh, there's a little bit of pleasure before it gets horrible.
I mean, that's like a dad inviting his kid to a cocaine party, but that's.
Yeah.
They're not good. That's why
they're not good. Yeah.
They're at the last.
They're at the last, but let's. Yeah. All right. Oops.
Chaos Knights.
Chaos Knights.
This one was also pretty tricky in the same vein of there's 1,000 names. Mm-hmm. Most of them have no character.
Mm-hmm.
And I found an instance of two Horus Heresy Titan pilots that were from different legions, met up, had a kid, and then one of them turned traitor. And I was thinking, maybe I could use that. But again, he was also one of those, he didn't know he had a kid because the loyalists saw someone boy, you are just murdering civilians like crazy in this mission, and so I don't trust you, so I'm going to keep the pregnancy a secret. Mm-hmm. And then he fell to Khorne, and now he's just a Khornate Berserker in a Warhound Titan. And then he ends up getting killed by his kid. His daughter saves her mother and kills him. It's a 40K family story.
Yep.
But it's also pretty paper thin. There's not much to go on there. So I went with Baron Tiberius Crane from the Assassinorum Kingmaker book, which is fantastic. You should read this book. It has so much lore on the assassins and knights, and it's a lot of fun. That's not an actual picture of Tiberius Crane. There's no artwork of him. That's just a picture of a knight pilot I pulled off of GW's website. That knight there is painted in the Dagger Crane household colors, and it's cool. So Baron Tiberius Crane, he commanded House Rao. He's the father to Lord Bazil Dagger Crane. And he, in order for the household of there's two competing houses, House Crane and House Rao, and the lord who commands both of the night houses on this planet has to be from both houses.
Okay.
But he's not allowed to father children.
Okay.
Because knightly stuff, and this is traditions. So there's all sorts of lineages that get crossed, and to make an heir is very complicated, and you have to jump through a bunch of hoops. So Baron Tiberius Crane has managed to father a candidate, and Tiberius Crane is an absolute politician, and he does a lot to keep knight egos and rivalries in check. Throughout the book, he's constantly kind of putting out fires and acting as a mediator between knights whose pride get injured at a feast and things like that. But then, spoiler alert for the book, the whole planet gets infected with the Conqueror Worm virus, which is scrap code, and turns a bunch of them evil. And it's not really clear if Tiberius Baron Crane was traitorous before the Conqueror Worm got out, but he's definitely traitorous after it comes out. And his kid gets infected and his mind's subsumed by scrap code. And then he ends up being backstabbed by another traitor knight who continues the plotline forward. And he gets shot in the back with a volcano cannon.
Oof.
So it's kind of unclear whether or not he was a traitor because he was infected by a demonic computer virus or not, or if he just became a traitor. Before he was a traitor, he did kind of he was the statesman who was in charge of a bunch of cocky jocks who he definitely mentioned a couple things of like, we're not really getting the respect that we should from the Imperium. Basically, they used to send us an envoy to say like, hey, we'd like you to ride to war. And this time they just sent us an email. Like, we're not really going to go out unless they send us an envoy because we're a night house and we demand respect. Yeah, but he's not like saying like we're not going to go to war if the Imperium actually follows protocol and calls us to war. So there's a bit of a mixed bag, but he ends up being a traitor. So
yeah, but I mean, he doesn't stab his own kid in the back, does he?
He doesn't stab his own kid in the back. This is true. He almost he almost gets into like shoots the main character, but then the main character gets Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it sounds like he was fine.
Yeah, I think he's fine. He's
and yeah, I think we can put it there. I mean, it is a shame that they need to have more lore on the Knights, because I actually think that there's
a giant wealth of information, and that's one of the reasons I like Assassinorum Kingmakers, because it does go into a huge amount of lore about the Knight households of this planet, and of a lot of the Loyalist stuff. And from that perspective, it's a fantastic book.
It's a completely different, kind of setup from most Imperial planets that you spend time on in the lore. So
also the book has some fantastic Knight combat sequences of like a Warhound, or I mean like like an Armiger isn't just like an AT-ST in Star Wars. Like one of them actually backflips one. And they can like climb buildings.
I seem to remember you talking about this.
There's some really cool like it talks about like dynamic things that you can use Knights for that isn't just like this model's on an enormous base and it can't fit anywhere on the table.
Yeah. I still think my favorite scene involving a Knight, Titan, is it's an Ork book where they like take the I forget the name of the.
Is it Brutal but Cunning?
Yeah. Where they have the the car that can basically
they use
do
a shock jump dragster.
The shock jump dragster. They skip the shield.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's pretty great. I love that book. But we digress.
But yes, that's a tangent.
All right. So next, Aeldari.
Aeldari. Boy, I have beef with Aeldari lore. Why are all the names the same, man? Why do all the names gotta be the same? I skipped over my candidate because I thought he was a god. He's not. He's just named the same as the god.
Probably there's like psychic resonances with the name that like we can't even pick up that distinguish them, or something silly like that.
So I was gonna go with what is it? Cornumus. He was one of the Eldar gods because most Eldar characters are kind of paper thin lore-wise.
Sure.
Until going back through, I found Azurman. Azurman's kind of a bro. He was born pre-fall.
Yeah.
He lost his brother when it all hit the fan. You found sanctuary in a temple. Because the temple was sacred, the demons couldn't go in there. And so he just kind of sat there contemplating suicide.
His brother's in his sword, too.
Yeah. For like a couple years until a little Eldar girl named Farathiel walked in and he's like, maybe there is purpose to living. So they went and had adventures together, and he devoted himself to the fighting arts. He became the first Phoenix Lord. Farathiel became the second Phoenix Lord, Jane Czar of the Howling Banshees. And then he's devoted himself to saving the Eldar race since the fall of the Eldar, which was like 12,000 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, and, there's a bit more also with, the girl who would become Jane Czar that, like, he actually had to save her from Proto-Drukhari and all that stuff.
She was in, I believe, a fighting arena and kind of set that up so she could get out and murder all the people, all the fallen, or I guess at that point they were just Eldar.
Yeah.
They were running it.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot we got to skip over because it's a 3-part series, a 3-book series. And his symbol is the yin yang.
Yeah, it is.
Didn't realize that until I started doing this research.
I know it's something that I think because he's so, not just in the lore old, but like in 40K the game old.
Yeah, like from the very beginning.
He's from an age when the yin yang was like cool, man.
Before the internet age.
Like when men would unironically just like wear a t-shirt with a yin yang,
get tattoos of it,
at the mall walking around. I like Azerman. I also like it's kind of interesting with him. Did you have more that you wanted to say?
A little bit. No,
go,
please.
So because like I like the fact that he was kind of just a Joe Schmo before the fall. Like he wasn't anybody particular. He just
he was just a dude who didn't die.
Just a dude who didn't die. He survived. He did his very best. And then, found purpose in taking care of other people.
Yeah. I do have a couple criticisms.
Sure.
In Way of the Seer, he has a heart-to-heart with an Eldar mother who their ship gets invaded, and she is not a fighter, and she gets confronted by a pair of human cultists who she murders one of them with a door, and the other one almost kills both of them until the Eldar baby kills it with psychic powers. And so then he's kind of talking to her afterwards of like, hey, let's kind of go through your trauma and talk about that. And she admits that, like, so it started when I was a kid, like an Eldar kid, when my mom turned into an aspect warrior and turned into an Exarch and became lost to that and just became a killing machine instead of being my mother anymore. And then Azerman has this moment of like, that could be really traumatizing to a child to watch their parent become a mindless soldier. I didn't think about that before. And it's like, buddy, you're 13,000 years old. How's that never occurred to you?
I mean, it hasn't occurred to that incarnation, let's say.
I suppose. But from that sequence, there is a quote when she says, like, and the woman says, like, look, now I have to go out and become a warrior. And she said, I'm afraid that I'm going to find joy in killing. And he says, I'm afraid I'll like killing. And Azerman says, you will. The truth could not be avoided. You cannot fight that. You will feel triumph and dismay in equal weight. You will desire the thrill of battle, the rush of blood. But these are things that we cannot deny about ourselves. I will teach you how to control them, how to harness the incredible powers that our bodies have been gifted by our ancestors. So, like, there is good lessons that he's teaching the Eldar, and like, they're dying people.
Yeah, they're in a bad
to fight for their survival.
They're in a bad place.
Yeah.
So, I think he can kind of get cut a little bit of slack for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he's pretty cool. Doesn't actually have his own kids as far as I can tell.
As far as I know, he doesn't have any of his own children.
But did actually kind of adopt.
Yeah, he's an adoptive dad. That counts.
So I think I'm going to put him a little bit higher than the Space Marine for that reason, because as far as I know, the Space Marine did not actually adopt anybody.
The Space Marine handed the kid off to another Imperial Guardsman, Katsuhiro, who then became, he took care of it
yeah,
for the rest of the rest of the Siege of Terra. So
which is very good, but not the same as,
not the same as actually raising a child.
Yeah, and I mean, also, Azerman, really does have Jane Czar's back.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
There's a couple books about it.
Yeah, we won't go into all of it. But yeah, good job, Azerman.
It wasn't hard to find a Drukhari dad. Because I wanted... So I'm just like, I don't know. Vect's gotta be a dad, right?
I don't know.
Same here. I can't find any canonical children of Vect. I am sure he has children.
Yeah, but I mean, that's sort of the whole point of him, right? Nobody's...
Kind of. Yeah, nobody knows a ding-dong-dang thing about him. But I did find an Eldar father.
Okay.
Archon Draylen Q. I assume that's pronounced Q.
Sure.
That is not his official artwork. That's just an Archon artwork. And the other artworks are from his Cabal of the Lords of the Iron Thorn.
Mm-hmm.
God, they got such a long name.
Yeah.
Archon of the Cabal of the Lords of the Iron Thorn. Good lord. That's their sigil. That's what their Cabalites and their Archons look like. That's their paint scheme. It's black with slightly cyan and red, unlike all the other Eldar, which are black with red that are slightly cyan. Oh man, some of them are purple, slightly.
Yeah. It's probably, I don't know, shades that are beyond our...
Oh, yeah, that only the finer palette can tease out. So, in the lore, Archon Q was described as astonishingly arrogant by other Dark Eldar. In 799.m38, he declared Pandemonium to be independent from Camorra.
Okay.
Which was a pocket dimension of Camorra.
Right.
Which this was declaring war on Azrubael Vect.
Yes.
Which is not a good idea.
No.
But again, with the astonishingly arrogant. So, shockingly, he actually held his own against the Cabal of the Black Heart for a couple of weeks. They fought themselves to a stalemate with, because the Cabal of the Lords of the Iron Thorn were made basically the best ships around.
Mm-hmm.
So they had mobile firepower while Cabal of the Blackheart was actually using their ships. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of at a standstill. However, he was done in by his own daughter, Varinia, who coated her lips with, or who kissed him after envenoming her lips with the essence of bloodfire neurotoxin. I'm going to assume that a kiss on the neck or something like that will do it.
I mean, they are Drukhari.
They are Drukhari. So she had secretly become one of Vect's concubines.
Aha.
So, he died in screaming agony, as all Eldar toxins do. Vect invaded. Now that the boss was gone, then they kind of fell in short order. He massacred just about everyone, left enough infrastructure intact so that they could still make super dope boats, and then had a homunculus reanimate Q's face and sewed it into a banner that Vect now hangs in his palace.
Sounds very Drukhari.
Yep.
So, from the perspective of Drukhari, though, he raised a very competent daughter.
I didn't think about it that way. Yes, you are correct.
So, I mean, yeah.
I don't think she married up, but she definitely concubined up.
Oh yeah, I mean that's I'm assuming she was one of the ones that was left alive, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was a few codices ago that her lore was mentioned and his lore was mentioned, but I mean, we can assume that she's still one of Vex's concubines.
So and
she's doing well for herself.
That's pretty good for by Drukhari standards. Yep. So yeah, I think I actually gonna give it a bump.
Okay.
Yeah, just for that. I mean, he's obviously like a jerk, but like all Drukhari are. Yeah. And but I mean, like, if he didn't raise an incompetent.
No, she is competent.
All right. What do we got next?
We got some more Xenos.
Genestealer Cults.
Okay, this is a problem. So Genestealer Cults don't have any characters.
Yeah, and I mean,
they exist as the bad guys in multiple stories, but I did find some characters.
So it's not just like the hive mind.
Well, that's Tyranids.
Okay, yeah.
But I found Patriarch Begator.
Okay.
Or otherwise Begator with an O at the end. It's unclear. It's spelled a couple different ways in the same source material. So Begator is the patriarch of a pauper prince cult, which was in the Imperial Palace on Terra, which is why he gets bumped up to the #1 dad of the Genestealer cult. He's doing something good for the, look, he may live in a sewer, but he lives in the most gilded sewer in the Imperium, so good for him, I guess?
It had to be a patriarch, and he's just the most successful.
Yeah, exactly. And also, look at this lore. This is the fantastic old-school lore of a Genestealer patriarch.
Oh, yeah.
That's, man... The digital artwork days don't do it justice.
No.
So he kicked off the Unthinkable War, which was the Custodes scrambling to figure out why there's a Genestealer cult literally under their feet. And they found out that there are actually 3 Genestealer cults on Terra. The Pauper Princes, the Worms of the Tendril, and the Shadowed. Yeah, but that's kind of all the lore we have. Pretty much all this lore comes out of the Genestealer Cults versus Custodes box that came out a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's about as in-depth as most lore gets for Genestealer Cults, unfortunately.
I mean, I think that we kind of just have to judge based off of, Patriarch in general.
How well is the cult doing?
Yeah, and I think in general, they're not actually trying to better anything for their quote-unquote children. They're just going to eat them.
Yeah, there's a bit of duplicity going on.
Yeah.
That's not great.
So, I mean, I still think I'm going to put it above Siege, though.
Yeah.
Because, at least their biomass gets to,
I mean,
be
he
part
lets
of
his kids play with explosives.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, here, take these satchel charges and go have fun, my children.
But mostly, I just want Siege to be last.
That's fair. It deserves it to be last.
Yeah. So
just as planned.
Oh, boy. Yep. Okay.
And a quick fun fact about... Begator.
Yes, let's go back.
He was actually captured by the Custodian Blade Champion, Aristides Carvalian, who is the artwork there, who is the model of the Blade Champion.
Ah, yes.
So that's his claim to fame. He got brought in by the named character of Custodes. That's not, Valdor or...
For sure. I mean, I remember that box. Actually, I still have the GSC half of it, but I haven't been able to sell it to anybody because
everyone bought one. Everyone bought 2 of them.
Yep.
Okay. Leagues of Votann. Oh man, this one. Leagues of Votann are all clones.
Yeah, right.
They're all clones printed by a computer.
Which is not even the same as the clone of the AdMech guy who just wanted a kid. Yeah.
And I tried reading through all their lore. The problem is there's one book on them.
Yeah.
There is literally only one Leagues of Votann book, and like it's like kind of Star Wars-esque of like, cool, we're gonna run off and be cowboys in space, and not like there's no family in that.
Sure.
You know, there's hearth and home and things like that. But so I ended up having to pick just the Votann, the Ancestor Core. That's what makes the Votann. It is it's like an advanced STC construct that has all some knowledge of the Leagues of Votann, but also has all of the memories of every single member of that clan, of that league.
A hive mind that isn't a hive mind.
Yeah, basically. And now all their RAMs are full, and all their memories full, and they're beginning to break down because they weren't meant to exist for 10,000 years. But, you know, hooray, Grimdark! Yeah, the Votann, and they control the clone skeins that print more Votann.
I mean, I guess you just then kind of have to judge how dad-like are space dwarves.
You know, they're pretty bros.
They are, right?
They actually, like, do work to, like, unionize and take care of each other, and they treat their robot assistants well, and...
You know, they have crafty hobbies, and they
probably paint miniatures.
They drink beer, I'm assuming, you know, like...
I don't... That never came up in the lore.
It never came up, but, like, you have to assume.
You have to assume. They have
dad bods.
Probably, yeah, oh, yeah, there's that. Boy, howdy, their armors have, yeah.
Their armor has a beard.
It's specifically forged for the gut. Yeah, the Votann are probably the least grimdark faction in 40k, I think.
No,
they're also
yeah,
one of the newest, so they've had the least amount of time to...
Yeah. Well, it's like how when Tau was first launched, it was they were supposed to be the
bright shining
and
boy howdy, a couple authors got their claws in that. And...
I think that they actually just they ran like focus groups and people were like, I don't want that.
Yeah, that's true.
So
you know, they're doomed because the Votann cores are failing, but I mean they're also like doing the best they can, and yeah, you know.
Yeah, maybe even above the lion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty fair. I think they're in the good job son category.
Yeah. Okay.
Home stretch. Your
Necrons.
bros.
Yes.
Necrons.
I'm really curious.
Okay. Do you want to make a guess?
You know, like I think you could go with the Silent King if you wanted just a dad figure. I'm trying to think that there are, you know, dynasties, and I mean, even for being robots, actually, like, they have a lot of complicated stuff going on.
Yeah, isn't it Emotech, the Stormlord, who's like the senile old man?
Yeah,
He's the old man yells at clouds of Necrons.
I mean, there's if you wanted to be perverse about it, you could go with Illuminor Sheris, who brought about, you know.
Funny you should mention that.
Okay. Yeah.
Illuminor Cesaris is the one responsible for biotransference. He is the one who built the forges that made the Necrons.
Yep.
He's their daddy.
He's a dick.
Oh, very much so. I mean, if he's not turning the human into slurry on screen, in artwork and in miniature form, he's not a good man. He is, the belief in constant evolution.
Yeah, and he's actually like a less sympathetic Fabius Bile.
Very much so. Yeah. So yes, the Deceiver, the Catan, the Deceiver was the mastermind behind biotransference. Cesaris was the one who actually did the deed and who actually built the things to make it happen.
And probably knew it was going to happen the whole time.
He did give himself a really dope body.
He did.
He believed biotransference was the path to the perfect evolution. And so, and he's constantly, even now, he's tinkering, learning, modifying, adjusting. He's still editing the Necrons to make a better thing, I guess. He's editing himself. Much of his lore is about how he's edited his own body to be more powerful and better.
I mean, he's... Yeah, if we're going into the game just a little bit, I mean, he's infantry, but he's T8. He has a 4-up feel no pain. I mean, he's pretty...
Cool.
Yeah, he's pretty tough. So, and then, you know, but he's...
He has recently been convinced by... Oh God, his name is Caesaras. The Silent King's name is Caesarach.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Give me like a... Don't make it the same 3 vowels that are changed.
I mean, every dwarf has in their name too. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Silent King convinced Caesaras that reversing biotransference is actually the way to go. So now he's working on a way to undo it all.
Yes.
So that's his current...
making zombies along the way.
Well, that's just a happy accident. You know, you gotta crack a few thousand skulls in order to make some progress, I guess.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that's actually kind of what is going on in the miniature.
The zombie spaghettification?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
I still haven't gotten around to painting him, mainly because I'm just like...
How do you paint the goo?
How do you paint the goo?
Well, get creative.
Yeah.
Look, I play Demons, so there's a lot of goo.
I mean, I painted the flayed ones, and then I decided to make some of the leather, like Tau leather, so it's blue. But we digress.
Outside the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, Caesaras is a real bastard.
He's absolutely like my least favorite Necron. Because the thing about Necrons that I do like is that while like the sort of lower class, you know, folks who got turned into warriors, like all their minds got lost and, you know, biotransference, the ones that were up on top who got, I don't know, like the better buffering or something, they all have like such great personalities. I mean, I think everybody's favorite book, well, not favorite, but like, you know, on a short list of favorites is Infinite and the Divine. You know,
for sure.
And like
Trajan's a hilarious character.
Trajan's a hilarious character who actually, you know, like has some shreds of humanity in him. Anyway, no,
not Caesaras.
No, not Illuminator Ceres. He's gonna go way down there. Yeah, because also, I mean, like,
he is the father of the current Necron.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
I think he's not as bad as a patriarch because he did think that what he was doing was the right thing to do. But he's still a jerk. So I think I'll just have to go the...
Expected more?
Or maybe the top of I'm not angry, just disappointed. Yeah, I can go with that.
Fun fact, he is currently super, super frustrated at Sisters of Battle.
Yeah.
Because he can counter warp shenanigans with Blackstone all day long, but he can't do anything about Faith, and it is bugging him.
Yeah.
And I find it hilarious that he is super annoyed at Celeste.
I mean, he's a very well written character, that's for sure. Like the fact that I even have strong emotions about him that way is indicative of that. But I know. Well, I think everybody is kind of annoyed at like what the heck is Faith? What's going on if it's not warp stuff? I mean,
yeah. Well, we'll see when they release a couple more books and they do another crusade.
Yep. Okay, Orks.
Everybody loves the Orks.
Yep. So
Orks grow out of the ground as mushrooms.
Yep.
So, not a lot of no actual dads.
No, there's not even females. I mean,
there's no males.
There's no males. They're just
fungus.
They're just fungus with all the sort of male characteristics.
Is there a named Runterd? Like,
yeah, right. Yes, there is a named Runterd that gets killed by the runts.
So I didn't go with him.
No.
Instead, I went with someone I've mentioned a couple times now.
Is it
It's the Beast.
It's the Beast, yeah.
There's no official artwork for the Beast. That's just a war boss. But like, Right, I put in a list of the War of the Beast.
Yeah.
So that's what it took to take him down. He is possibly one of the most... Actually, no, not possible. He is confirmed as one of the most dangerous characters in Warhammer.
Yeah.
His sigil is the Orc sigil. Was his personal sigil. That's how much of an imprint upon Orc culture he left. That skull with horn sigil was his personal icon. His personal heraldry was black and white checkers.
Yeah.
And you see that everywhere on Orc stuff. Those are residues left over from the Beast. And just how influential he was to Orcs. A side note, the Beast was probably actually 6 Orcs. Like a council of these enormously powerful Orcs. But for functionality, they were all the same.
Sure.
So the Beast is noted as being the size of a hab block, which unfortunately I then spent far too long trying to figure out how big a hab block is.
Big.
And it is anywhere from 30 feet by 100 feet to a skyscraper. So we're going to assume that and then also if the actual accounting of his size is correct, he's probably about 30 feet tall.
That seems reasonable for kind of what is known about Orcs.
Right, because there's the whole Wog energy of the Gestalt Psychic, and so if enough people or enough Orcs believe in it, it grows and grows and grows, and so...
Well, and also just Orcs grow the longer they live and the more they fight. And he lived and fought the longest, so got the biggest.
So he's also described as being the size of a Morkanaut.
That is pretty big.
So that's... the Space Marines who first encountered him thought he was a statue until he moved.
I mean, I think that's like Krork-sized, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So... The Beast launched the largest Orc Wog in the galaxy in 544.m32 that took over like half the galaxy and ended up with multiple attack moons. Well, there were multiple attack moons. Some of them got blown up. One in orbit around Terra, besieging Terra. I mean, nobody has gotten that close before for Horus.
Yeah.
And he had half the Space Marine legions on his side. The Beast just had most of the Orcs in the galaxy.
I mean, again, from an Orc perspective, that's pretty darn good.
He is pretty darn good. He almost broke the Imperium in half. He is the quintessential Orc.
Yep.
Possibly the most successful Orc, and he died doing what he loved. Getting thrown into a warp core by Vulcan, and then getting blown up with Wog juice, and yeah.
I mean, it's about the fight, not about necessity.
It's about the fight, and he had a zogging good time.
He did. I mean, and again, from an Orc perspective, there's nothing they want more than a really good fight and a good Wog, and he delivered more than any other war boss ever in history.
That's true.
So, I mean, I think he's got to go... I'm not going to put him above the actual dads, but, for an Orc, that's pretty good.
When Orcs think of a father figure, they think of the Beast.
Yeah. I mean, either that or the gods, but, hey.
Well, Gork and Mork, that's true. Yeah. I mean, at a certain point, they just the Beast becomes... the avatar of Gork and Mork.
Pretty much, yeah. All right.
Tyranids.
Well, we kind of spoiled it earlier.
Okay, but I worked really hard to make it not the hive mind.
Sure.
Because how the hell am I going to do the hive mind?
I don't know. He did the Votann.
Well, okay, yeah. But the Tyranids have been around longer, and there's enough lore. So I went with Hermatius.
Interesting.
Hermatius was a tech priest biologus who was charged with developing a cure for the Genestealer, or not a cure, but an antibody for the Genestealer plague. He failed. He set up his station on Necromunda, because Necromunda has a giant stock of genetic material and genetic information hidden away. So he set up a secret base there to do his experiments. After a couple centuries of work, he wasn't making any progress, and he was getting frustrated, and he accidentally infected himself with a sample. So he injected himself with the anti-agent, the antigen that he had made, and it failed. Realizing that it was failing, he destroyed all of his work and ran off into the sewers. And later on, the mouse train was created. And so that is where the mouse train Tyranid life forms come from. He was later hunted down by an Inquisition kill squad and disposed of, but the mouse train patriarch kept his genetic memory and recreated Hermatius as the second son. So he's constantly being reborn to continue his work of expanding the mouse train line and creating more and being a mad scientist.
I mean, that's definitely more of a father figure than the Hive Mind.
Yes.
So, props there. I don't know, unwilling father figure?
Maybe. Yeah, well now, as the second son, as Hermatius reborn, he's super happy to be doing it.
Sure.
He's kind of being mind controlled, but you know.
Yeah. But, I mean, I don't know. I don't think I can rate him too much higher than a patriarch.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Poor guy indeed.
That's one I actually do feel bad for, you know?
He did his best.
He did his best.
You know,
500 years? I mean, you're going to drop a vial at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, no. Lab leak theory. Oops. Don't want to get canceled. Yeah, I'm going to put him above the patriarch because he really... Maybe I'll even put him... Yeah. No, I'll put him above the patriarch.
Yeah. He's still not good.
No. All right, we just got one
and the final one
left.
Tau.
Now there should be something here.
There is. So there is an actual dad.
An actual dad.
Took a little while to find. There's not a lot of named characters for Tau. And most of them are just ethereals or suits that we never see inside the suit.
Yeah, and ethereals have their own issues.
There's the whole mind control issue that it may or may not be a thing.
Yep.
But did you ever play the Fire Warrior game or read the Fire Warrior novel?
I did not.
So the main character of that is you see him down in the bottom right. Lakai's. All their names have apostrophes everywhere, so I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong, but I'm going to do my best. Lakai's dad, Shazo Ta'au Shi'ur, I think,
Sure.
or Commander Strong Triumph.
Let's go with that.
Yeah. Was his dad. He was a war hero. So he was known to the Tau Empire as a brave and noble warrior, had multiple highly publicized speeches about the greater good, and he died a hero defending Falshia from Tyranids. However, as you get a little bit more into the plotline of the novel, you find out that he was actually an ass. Commander Strong Triumph was a hothead, he was quick to anger, and he once shot a subordinate who questioned him.
Oops.
Yeah, and he died being an idiot because a Tyranid warrior dented his crisis suit, and so he decided to 1v1 the swarm to get revenge, and they just kind of ate him.
Whoops.
However, he's also a little bit of a tragic figure because the Tau propaganda department saw this up-and-coming commander, highly publicized him as this amazing warrior, and then he was never really able to be the hero that the media made him out to be.
Yeah.
And so he could never live up to that, probably had some sort of complex, and was an ass about it for his entire life until he tried to be too much of a hero and died because of it.
Well, who can understand Xenos psychology?
Bagos by Logos?
Yeah, right. But are there any details on how he treated his kid?
Lacaille doesn't have a lot of good memories about him. He wasn't, because he was off being a war hero the entire time. And so Lacaille enters, also in kind of a tragic tale, Lacaille enters, becomes a fire warrior to kind of, in some way, follow in his father's footsteps. And at a certain point destroys the hollow disc of his father's last recording to him, because he realizes that war actually sucks and that he wasn't actually a war hero. He was just in charge of a crisis suit cadre. And so all the propaganda was lies. And as the story goes on, Lacaille gets more and more PTSD. Then he breaks and throws away the hollow disc. But at the end, he has a shard of the holodisc returned to him, and he kind of has this this understanding of well, now I've also been through the meat grinder, and I kind of understand somewhat. But then he's also ends the story in a mental hospital with severe PTSD, and it's unclear as to his fate.
Well,
so, as you mentioned, with the Tau getting grimdarked up. Yeah, that is one of them of the where does it actually lie of.
Oof, yeah. That is a rough one. It doesn't sound like the dad was actively abusive, which is a low bar. Okay.
He wasn't super nice.
Yeah.
It's not really... that's one of the issues with a lot of these stories about dads, is that's not the focus of the story, and so a lot of that's glossed over.
Sure.
So it can be kind of assumed that he wasn't exactly nice to his kids. It's never explicitly said that he's abusive to them or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's never said, he's not buying them ice cream.
Sure. But he's also not, leading his species to disaster.
There's also that.
Yeah. So, I think we could...
in some ways, at the end of the day, I think he might have just been, a soldier doing the best he can and being unable to live up to a comic book version of himself.
That's fair. I think... there's enough in there... Just because of more detail, I think I'm going to bump him up. All right, so this will be the, for people who just want to get an image of where everything's ranked, although it's fairly meaningless if you just skip to this and don't actually watch
that is any of the problem. Yeah, we're going to force you to watch the whole thing. No click-throughs here, because there's a lot of nuance between characters, because it comes down to much more of a judge of character and less of a judge of where you ended up.
Yeah, some of these are, I think, unsurprising. Tyranids are just going to be, low, and it's, I suppose, unsurprising that Knights are going to be high. But if you want to know the particulars of why, or why the Drukhari one, that's an interesting one, I think.
How did a Drukhari father rank so high?
You gotta watch to find out.
Astounding arrogance.
All right.
This is the whole list that I was able to come up with. I'm sure there are more out there. There are more factions out there that I did not cover, because I just decided to go with playable factions. So please post characters and stuff like that down in the comments that you want to talk about, or that, who knows, I'll find, I gotta have a new project now.
Yeah, I know that there are other characters of unplayable factions, unless you consider just any human could be an Imperial agent. Because there are some interesting stories that do specifically deal with, fatherhood, but they're all just kind of random humans for the most part.
Yeah, the random humans, and they're also hidden within the stories.
They're hidden
Them
within
being
stories.
dads is not something that really appears on their 40k wiki page.
No, and I mean...
So they are hidden within the lore of 40k. I think one of Gaunt's ghosts is a dad, but he lost his kid when the planet fell. So, I mean, he's a character that I could have looked at, and there's still so many more out there.
Oh, yeah. And I think it is also, though, I would be very interested in reading, books that dealt a bit more with the parent-child relationship in a meaningful way. I mean, it sounds like of all of the ones that we went through in terms of, if I were to just go on dealing with that relationship, the Tau one probably has the most going for it, discussing that kind of, that relationship.
There is more to unpack. I wasn't able to finish reading the whole book, so I had to...
Wait, you couldn't read 100 books for this research? All the way through?
Got to 99 and just tapped out. No. Yeah, there's definitely some I skimmed over, so there's always more information to find. And that's one of the joys of 40k lore, is it is so wild and crazy, and there's anything goes. There's so much to find, and none of it's true. All of it's true.
Yeah. I mean, hey, if we've managed to make a nearly 3-hour episode about it, that should say something in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Good luck editing.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thank you for doing all the research, and thanks for coming over to talk about it.
Oh, happy to do it. This is fun.
This was a lot of fun. I laughed a lot. I think I've been smiling the entire time. My cheeks are starting to get a little tired.
Yeah, that's how you know you get them.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, and I'll...
Yes, thank you all very much for watching, and I hope you've all had a good time of, the Adeptus Paternus sleep aid.
Yes, and like Telfer said, please come up with more lore-based ideas for us to work on.
Sure, these are a ton of fun to go delve into, deep forums, and Vitaly Tychon, he's not on the English wiki. He's on the German wiki. So I had to translate over all his pages.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's just, and not everything is on every page, and some of it's only in books that are from the 80s.
Yep.
And finding PDFs of those is hard.
Yes, I actually did buy the reprint of the Rogue Trader book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's all fantastic, and so much of it is hidden in just little tiny asides and inside dust jackets, basically.
Yep, the little paragraphs of italic text.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, thanks for sticking with us so long, and have a good night.
Mm-hmm. Until next time.